This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Apple's still minting more money than God, right?
Geopolitics front and center for global Wall Street.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Stocks are coming off of another record high.
And Michael Barr with news.
U.S. Secretary of State discussed the conflict in Gaza.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo. She's returned.
I
Gulfstream landed at Middletown.
Very nice.
And,
Very
there
nice.
she is. She's
Yep.
back. Lisa, are you okay?
I'm good.
You,
Just
did
a
you watch
little-
the Yankees last night?
No, unfortunately, no.
No, fortunately.
I knocked out.
Fortunately, yes, you did not watch it.
I
We'll talk
know.
about that later here.
Please no.
In the heart of earnings seasons right now, Wendy's out, Where's the Beef, all sorts of other companies. Comcast out with a red sticky. Can't say enough, folks, about the Bloomberg headline service. I have sat there with our headline team.
Yes.
And they're in their turrets as all this stuff comes out and people make this happen. And the level of profanity is they're going,
exactly.
they're all wired up like 10 people in London, in New York, on the West Coast.
Yep.
And it's a miracle. Gannett out reiterating their full year outlook on and on. I'm just trying to avoid
Wow.
Microsoft and Meta, but you know, Conoco with a dividend increase, I believe. And, you know, that's where we are. I was asleep last night. Mrs. Keene woke me up. She goes, "Can Garrett go back in?"
Yeah, the fifth inning. Oh,
That
my
worked
goodness.
out.
That will.
Anyways, we'll get to it. It's a busy day here, and of course, we've got some important earnings this afternoon. On to the jobs report on Friday. We're going to start strong in a moment with a gentleman from Macquarie. Terry Weissman will be with us here. Right now, from the Interactive Broker Studios, our Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
And we've got NASDAQ futures leading the losses right now, down nearly 1%. And this is after earnings from two tech giants. Well, they really failed to impress investors. Talking about shares of Microsoft down 3%, profit and revenue top forecast. But here's the thing, it forecasted slower quarterly cloud revenue growth. And shares of Meta, they're down 3%, warning about worsening AI losses. After the bell, we move on to Apple, which is down 0.2%, and Amazon as well, down 1%. So we have NASDAQ futures down 0.8%, 184 points. Dow futures down 0.4%, 195 points. And S&P futures down 0.7%, or 41 points. We have the two-year yield 4.17%. That's down 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 4.27%, and that's down 2 basis points. To earnings, a lot to get through. I'll get to a couple. We'll start with Cigna, up more than 1%. Reported third quarter earnings topped expectations, affirmed its outlook for the full year. And then Merck, down nearly 1%, lowered the top end of its full year sales guidance. Demand for its HPV vaccine, well, that fell for a second straight quarter in China. And Estee Lauder ADR is down 15%, pulled its guidance for the year. Uncertainty in China, that's what they're saying. A lot more coming in, including Uber, Bristol Myers, Comcast. We'll get to those. And the headline coming across, Peloton has named Peter Stern CEO and president. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Big earnings day. Real statement there on accounting transparency and just getting it all out there as well. Futures at negative 41. Terry Weissman joins right now with all of his work over the years at Bear Stearns and now holding court at Macquarie here. And I'm going to do an audible today, Terry, on we've lost scope and scale. I looked at Facebook yesterday. I looked at Microsoft yesterday. And we're quibbling about percentage changes, gaming out 90 days or whatever. You've got a brilliant essay on American exceptionalism. Forget about buy, hold, sell, which is unfair to you. Do we have a doubt that this tech juggernaut will just keep going, or could it end?
The investment in technology by these companies is going to continue. I think they are vested in the concept, certainly, of artificial intelligence and the productivity gains that we're going to benefit from over time. The question is all of this investment that they're doing more than is optimal with respect to the productivity gains that are going to come out of this revolution? The problem is that when we're talking about these technological revolutions, these innovative revolutions, we don't really know in 10 to 20 years just how much revenue increases are going to come, just how much GDP is going to strengthen, just how much the global economy is going to benefit from these things. So I think the market doesn't like things that are 10 to 20 years in the future. And I think with these kinds of revolutions, that's what we're talking about. We haven't even started to scratch the surface with respect to what the applications of AI are going to be. Is it going to be in biotechnology and pharmacy? Is it going to be in consulting? Is it going to be in legal, et cetera? We're still in the investment phase, and until we start to see the benefits of this, I think there'll always be doubts about the prospective benefits.
Paul, before the pandemic, Microsoft EBITDA $56 billion. We're modeling this year off the FA screen, which you invented. 135 billion.
Yep.
56 to 135, and we're worried about guidance.
Buy 'em and
90
own 'em.
days forward.
I'm with Dan Ives on this one. You just got to own tech. Hey, Terry, when you think back, you step back and you look at some of this, the earnings we're seeing coming out of some of these big tech companies, seeing some of the economic data we're seeing coming out of some of these big countries here. Talk to us about American exceptionalism. How do you think about the U.S. economy versus the rest of the world, and maybe how that impacts currencies and rates and all those things?
Well, look, there's many facets to American exceptionalism. There's a long-term aspect to it, which is that over the last few years, right, we're talking about actually more than a decade now, American growth has been superlative compared to the rest of the world. And then there's American exceptionalism in the short term, right? We're talking about the fact that over the last few months, we continue to see degradation, erosion in global growth. China is struggling with aggregate demand. Europe is struggling. And yet the economy in the U.S. continues to be somewhat resilient, okay? With respect to the short term, I think that's going to continue. I don't see anything on the horizon right now, and certainly not with respect to Europe, that is going to turn around their predicament with respect to growth. How does it affect currencies? Look, people like to invest and bring their money to countries that have growth, where you can build a business and can reasonably anticipate that you're going to make money from doing it. That's why the dollar is strong. Money is flowing here because this is where the growth is. And as long as that persists, the dollar will stay strong.
So I think that one of the questions for a lot of folks is, kind of this Federal Reserve. They've had that 50 basis point rate cut. Where do they go from here, and where should they go from here? And again, as Thomas has mentioned, we had some pretty solid earnings out of some of these big companies here. How do you think the Fed's thinking about what they should do with rates?
Look, I hate to think that politics should interfere in the Fed's decision-making, but politics maybe should interfere in the Fed's decision-making. Because most of the models that economists are running these days do suggest or say that if former President Trump were to take office, and if he were to enact or invoke most of the policies in his agenda that he hopes to invoke, we will see more inflation. Okay, and the market is already telling us that, right? If you look at 5-year break-evens, they've risen from 1.9% just a few weeks ago to almost 2.3% now. A reflection, I believe, of the prospect that we're going to get more inflation if Trump wins. Should the Fed take into account that? Maybe not that, but certainly it should take into account the fact that the market the break-evens are rising, and inflation expectations are rising, and I think that should certainly temper their decisions with regard to rate cuts. The baseline is 25 basis points, but if break-evens continue to rise between now and next week, let's say to 250, maybe they'll reconsider even the 25 basis point cut.
I was put in a timeout chair once by a guy named Alan Meltzer, Carnegie Mellon University. We're talking about aggregate economics. Dr. Weissman, without question in this election season, we have haves and have-nots. The haves and have-nots with technology, going back to the Luddite 19th century, Jeremy Bentham even, as far back as, have we ever been this polarized? Because I'm looking at GDP and I'm going, I got 5% real GDP for the haves and I got 0.5% real GDP for the have-nots.
So the last 4 years under the Biden administration have seen superlative GDP growth compared to the Trump administration, and unemployment rates have been lower. That's unequivocally true. You can't really debate that. It's in the data. The problem, however, is that if you look at real median family incomes over the last 4 years, they have fallen. And to the extent that they have fallen because of inflation, which is probably the case, there's a case to be made that the average family is a little bit worse off now than they were 4 years ago. So with regard to polarization, sure, you can point to things like unemployment rates being lower and GDP growth being higher, but there are certainly people who are suffering compared to they were 4 years ago. And I think that's an important part of the political dynamic that we're seeing now.
Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
I was going to say, so my Fed, should my Fed cut 25 basis points in November, or should they wait?
Well, if the meeting were held today,
yeah.
Okay, where break-evens have gone up, but they haven't gone up to a point that they threaten, let's say, the target or suggest that the target will be exceeded on inflation, because 2.3% or 2.4% on the 5-year break even is not consistent with headline PCE inflation above 2%. But if they were to go higher, if those break evens were to go higher over the next week, at the time the Fed meets, let's say to 2.5, 2.6, because of what happens coming out of the election, then yes, the Fed should reconsider cutting by 25 basis points. The Fed should pay attention to inflation expectations. They're important in the determination of inflation itself.
Link your work into the Macquarie commodity call, whether it's Rio Tinto or BHP Billiton. You people care about Pacific Rim commodities.
Right.
What's the call?
Well, the call is that commodities are going to be weak. Not just iron, but oil as well, and maybe some other commodities too. But that derives from the premise that there are important supply considerations around the world, especially in respect to the hydrocarbon space. But also, China is weak. Look, face it. You cannot have a bullish commodity call when China cannot get its act together with regard to domestic demand, especially household demand and infrastructure and investment.
Did you stay up last night and watch this torture?
No, I did not watch the game last night.
The problem is,
I didn't want to be tortured.
Michael Barr did, and he's been medicated. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Yeah, buddy. The Dodgers World Series champions, Los Angeles, defeated the New York Yankees, overcoming a 5-run deficit to win 7-6 in Game 5. Series MVP Freddie Freeman slugged 4 home runs and 12 RBIs in the Fall Classic. Freddie, what's up with that hot bat of yours?
I wish I had the real answer. I don't. You just kind of get into some heaters over the course of your career, and I'm just thankful that it was got the heater during the World Series.
Kamala Harris is calling for Americans to stop pointing fingers at each other. She told supporters at her Harrisburg, Pennsylvania rally that she feels a woman's decisions about pregnancy should be private.
One does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government shouldn't be telling people what to do. Not the government. Not the government.
The vice president also made her pitch in North Carolina and Wisconsin. In Green Bay, Wisconsin, former President Donald Trump climbed into a white garbage truck that carried his name as he insisted President Joe Biden called Trump's supporters garbage. The White House says Biden was referring to the hateful rhetoric that Trump's New York rally, the comic that's called Puerto Rico a floating pile of garbage. Trump also again talking about being a protector of women and saying how his people want him to not talk about it like that anymore.
They said, sir, I just think it's inappropriate for you to say, pay these guys a lot of money. Can you believe it? I said, well, I'm going to do it whether the women like it or not.
Trump and Harris will campaign today in southwestern states. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, and Lisa.
Hot Stove League starts right now. What do the Yankees do, Paul Sweeney? Lisa Mateo, jump in here. I know you watched it. What do the Yankees
Juan Soto,
do?
I don't know what happens to Juan Soto. It doesn't sound like he's just going to go to the highest bidder, it sounds like. So I don't know who that's going to be, whether it's the Yankees or the Mets or
Orioles?
the Dodgers or the
Orioles?
O's. Maybe the O's. Who knows? But anyway, that's kind of where you got to start there.
Yeah, and where did Judge go? You know, he finally got something going
What
with
is this?
his
Where
bat,
does
but then
Judge go? He
makes
signed a
an error.
19-year contract. He makes more than the GDP of New York
But he
State.
dropped an easy fly
Easy.
ball.
Truman said my daughter could have caught that.
Yes. Lisa Mateo's daughter, who was an outstanding softball player, could have caught that. So we'll see. It was just a bad fifth inning, kids.
was
I don't
really
know
bad.
what happened. No idea. But that fifth inning will go down in Yankee history.
Yeah,
No question.
unfortunately.
I'm trying to teach Mrs. Keene baseball fundamentals, and I flunked last night.
last night, yeah.
I went down in flames. From New York City, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
The Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures extending their declines on the busiest day of earnings season. About 60 companies expected to open their books today. A few moments ago, we talked about Cigna, Merck, Estee Lauder. Now I want to get into Uber, down nearly 6%, reported weaker than expected ride bookings, issued a muted holiday forecast, even as it delivered record profit. Then you have Bristol Myers, they're up more than 0.5%. Third quarter earnings revenue blew past expectations. Strong sales from its blood thinner Eliquis, also a number of new drugs. It also raised its full-year revenue and adjusted earnings forecast. And finally, Comcast, up 5%, reported adjusted earnings per share for the third quarter, beat estimates. So now we have NASDAQ futures taking a hit. That's from Microsoft Meta earnings, right now down about 0.8%, 174 points. Dow futures down 0.5%. S&P futures down 0.7%. We have the two-year yield, 4.17%. That's down 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year, 4.28%, and that's down 2 basis points. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. The VIX out through 21.48 this morning. Apple, Amazon, Tim and Carol have that for you this afternoon as well. Yep. We're going to do an audible right now. This is a joy. This could be a 3-hour interview. Monica Guerra is at Morgan Stanley. She's looking at bigger Washington policy, the election and all that. She comes out of the trenches of Fitch Ratings and had a tour of duty. And I mean, this is like the Marines coming out of the trenches for the city of New York as Director of Capital Budget and Economic Development. I got to go to an audible here. I don't want you to comment on the political mess in the city of New York. I do want you, is by far and away the number one expert we have on the future fiscal integrity of this great city. How does it look to Monica Guerra?
Well, to me, I think that it does ultimately look good. One of the things that the city does, they have this midnight budgeting move where they never have money. There's all this infighting within the city council. And then at the last minute, they'll come through with a finalized budget. As far as, handling the, addressing the bigger, sort of elephant in the room, I don't want to name any names, et cetera. But, we are looking at potential for change, right? And so the thing you got to remember is that politics are cyclical, they change, people move on.
Okay, LaGuardia, dump of America. Newark is dump of America.
Thank you very much.
Number two dump of America, LaGuardia, just rated best airport in the country. It costs $8 billion, whatever, to do. Do we have the big city vision to maintain the growth rate, the little g, to take care of our fiscal proclivities here in New York City?
There is, a pendulum that swings, right? So we went from, I guess to name check Bloomberg since we're here, from a very, pro-business environment, something that was more socially focused. And we see that at the federal level as well, right? Where there are changes in trends. And so I don't think that this is, a dead end, right? We can definitely continue to capitalize on everything that makes us.
I got to do a disclaimer here. Of course, Michael Bloomberg, of course, signing the checks for me and Paul. Not Lisa's check. That's signed by someone else. Mr. Bloomberg, of course, part of what we do each and every day. The former mayor of New York and future owner of the New York Yankees.
Monica, what are you telling your clients, Morgan Stanley Wealth Management? I'm sure you get it 1,000 times a day over the last several months. How do you game out this election? How do you position your portfolios? What are you telling your clients here? Because we're going to have an election next Tuesday, whether we like it or not.
Right. Well, one of the things that I emphasize over and over and over again is that Congress is ultimately more important in those sector and industry outlooks. The president sets the tone. Essentially, is a big part in those final deal-making measures, but we have to see what happens in the House and Senate. And right now, as we stand, obviously I'm not calling the election, things could change. The Senate looks like it's going to go to the GOP. The House looks like it's going to go to the Democrats. Okay. Now, the best sort of news around that is that markets love gridlock, and they outperform under both a split government scenario in Congress, but also when you have a unified Congress and an opposition president. And so I really like to emphasize that we have to watch what happens there, especially around taxes, and if we're going to position to really focus on those tax mitigation strategies if we're looking at any potential changes that could increase that number.
So how do you think this is going to, if we do have that kind of split government here. What are you telling the Morgan Stanley clients to do here? Is it just like, don't worry about it, stick with if you're long equities or long bonds or whatever? What are you telling the clients there? What are the advisors asking you, I guess?
Yeah, in the near term, it's stick to that long-term strategy, because around election day, you're going to have increased volatility. We could have rolling volatility until the election is decided. And even though we have created both Democratic and Republican long baskets, and the Republican long baskets have been outperforming the Democratic baskets by 13%, we don't say pile in.
So who's been outperforming again?
The Republican long basket.
Okay, the basket.
Yes.
And
yes.
what's a Republican basket?
So the Republican basket includes 12 different ETFs that cover essentially
Callaway
sectors
Golf.
and industries. Sectors and industries that would benefit from policy proposals that come out of the GOP.
Oh, okay.
So those would be things
What's
like
a Democratic basket look like? Come on,
the
we're fair and
Democratic
balanced.
basket. It would be your
Atlanta
clean
Braves.
energy. No, like clean energy, things like Medicare, managed care,
Right.
beneficiaries, et cetera. And on the GOP side, you're looking
Right.
at traditional energy as sort of a real juxtaposition.
I'm just going to go to the zeitgeist right now. I got 8 ways to go here, but Obamacare supposedly under some threat. I see in the zeitgeist, Axios and others, David Guerra telling me the Republicans begging the Trump campaign to stay away from Obamacare. Is Obamacare a sacred cow?
I think it's symbolic. There's not much more that can be done to undercut Obamacare in the ACA.
What does Obamacare cost Lisa Mateo on her 1040 tax form? The belief is I'm paying for Obamacare. Am I? Is Lisa Mateo paying for Obamacare?
You can opt in right through the state exchanges, and so that's the important thing. You can opt in, and so it's a broader exchange that you can participate in. Now, what we are all paying for, right, is the Medicare, Medicaid surtax. So that's a set number. Now, one of the things that I do want to highlight as far as broader risk is, folks are looking or sort of signaling that there might be tides moving towards a Trump win. We see that in the betting markets. You see that with, again, the baskets that I just highlighted, our ETF baskets. But I really want to caution when we're thinking about risk that because of how tight this race is, if you pile in on that, that could also be your biggest loss. So right now, when we're giving guidance, it's hold off. Let's wait and see what happens with Congress, and then we can position.
I mean, how are you thinking about the timing of this? I mean, we might not know for days or even weeks, some people are suggesting about how this, that's just another level of risk for investors to deal with, presumably.
Heightened volatility, but again, it's just emphasizing especially from wealth perspective, when we're talking to retail, point in time,
Right.
stay focused and disciplined.
You're like, you can just tell she chews glass. I mean, she's in a meeting, and there's no Zoom meetings with Monica Guerra. What are you going to do with the New York Yankees? I mean, you go down to Tampa here in spring training. What is the Monica Guerra prescription for the dreaded New York Yankees?
I don't have one. I don't follow baseball. I'm sorry.
Good, you're qualified.
I'm sorry.
You're qualified.
I'm sorry.
All right, let me ask you this, for our John Tucker, our congestion correspondent. What happened to our congestion tax? We got all the cameras up on Lexington Avenue.
It's okay. You can have a mimosa while you're in.
Yeah. I mean, when I've been smoking, so we'll
All
see.
right,
We'll see.
Very good. Monica Guerra, thank you so much for your patience. Monica Guerra, head of U.S. policy at Morgan Stanley Wealth Management. I mean, we got John Tucker. He was ready to start paying all the congestion fees, and they just
somehow, particularly if the Democrats win those important districts, Governor Hochul was worried about. You got to believe the first Wednesday of November, the custard tax is back on the table.
All right, very good.
For those of you worldwide, this is a sensitive topic in New York City to say. At least Monica Guerra, Morgan Stanley, don't be a stranger. Thank you so much for that perspective, particularly on the city of New York. Paul, we got Apple and Amazon this afternoon.
I know.
I mean, they're going to come out, stock's going to go up, and then there's going to be like, guidance.
Exactly. I mean,
MacBook
Meta and
Pro.
Microsoft, I thought the numbers were fine yesterday, as you were suggesting. But again, on the margin, a little bit disappointing here, leading to a little bit of sell-off here in the markets here, Tom. You got the S&P off 0.7% today, and the NASDAQ off 0.8% in the futures market.
Nobody can pronounce Azure.
No,
I get like Azure.
Yeah, I'm Azure. That's how
Azure, really?
That's what
Lisa,
I do.
where are you?
I'm Azure.
Azure.
Right.
Da-da.
Tomato.
Stay with us. I won't sing, I promise. Bloomberg Surveillance.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this Bloomberg Business Flash is brought to you by BNY. BNY's expertise and insights can help clients achieve their ambitions. Visit BNY.com. All right, we have futures falling. Investors digesting those results from Microsoft and Meta. They're also digesting economic data. Kind of blur that picture for interest rate cuts from the Fed. We're talking about GDP. Today, we get reports on America's labor market. We have the employment cost index and also weekly jobless claims. Also on today's agenda, core PCE inflation data on personal income and spending. That's all out in about an hour from now. So we have NASDAQ futures down 0.8%, Dow futures down 0.4%, S&P futures down 0.7%. We have the 2-year yield 4.18%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year 4.28%. That's down 1 basis point. To commodities, we have Brent crude up about 0.4%, $72 a barrel. WTI crude $69 a barrel. We have spot gold lower at $2,777 an ounce. Stocks on the move. Roku down 13%. Said it's no longer reporting the number of households that use its products each quarter. Then you have Robinhood down 10%. Reported revenue missed estimates. eBay down nearly 9%. Its holiday season sales forecast, well, that fell short of estimates.
Yeah, I saw that.
But then on the flip side, you have Etsy. You know, their shares up more than 5% because they had a revenue
That's
beat.
artsy
Shoppers,
stuff.
well, yeah, what they want, the artsy gifts, those little subtle touches. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Well, Lisa, thanks so much. Greatly appreciate it. Good morning across the nation. Of course, out on YouTube, subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. It's growing each and every day. Thrilled with that growth as we get this started, this new digital expansion of what we're doing. YouTube, that's after your commute, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. Sirius XM, somebody said to me, they came up to me in Rome.
In
They
Rome?
said, I listen on Sirius XM. You go, don't talk about it enough.
Yeah, it's a good
So I
point.
flunked.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's channel one, I think it's 121.
120, yeah, or something.
120,
121.
121. You know,
we'll check
get
with
there.
Ari.
Yeah, we'll check. Our distribution, it's complex, and really the modern distribution. And of course, it's founded on 99.1 FM Washington and 92.9 FM in Boston. Got a special Boston announcement coming up in about 2 weeks. Looking forward to that. And then we've got Bloomberg 1130 AM in New York City. Good morning. Now on rates, which is important. Forget about Apple, Microsoft, and all that. George Kangalvis joins us now with MUFG Securities America. George, is there a permanent shift to higher rates, or can you frame out a path to the disinflation vector we saw earlier this year?
Good morning. And, look, Tommy, I've been doing this for a long time, and I can tell you this is probably the most emotional I've seen the bond market as we count the days heading into the election. It's typically a market that's grounded in math, but right now it's really being driven by emotions. And so I think, there's a number of paths that we can all kind of explore. The so-called Trump trade has kind of taken over and driven a lot of the moves, and that is largely being felt in the 10-year. But, we do caution that, a lot is priced in. We've had a 50 bip rate cut from the Fed, and then followed by a 70 basis point rise in rates. And so we're definitely living in a world where everything's upside down.
So what is driving that? Again, George, I'm an equity guy. I don't know what's going on in the bond market, but I've got a Fed that I know is cutting rates. But as you mentioned, we've had a big backup in rates here. As you mentioned, the 10-year at 4.28%, the 2-year, my goodness, I could sit in a 2-year note and get 4.17%. What's the market telling us?
I mean, look, the market is telling us that they're concerned around the fiscal outlook. Really, where it matters if it's either a red wave or a blue wave, and the chances of a blue wave are low. That would be the biggest surprise of all. But a red wave still would at least, I guess, empower the ability to spend and tax and use sort of the bond market to finance those tax cuts. I think that the market is getting to a point where we keep doing the same thing over and over again and expanding our debt load, and they're commanding a premium for it.
So, George, what are you suggesting to your clients here? I mean, did they just stick with a 2-year Treasury at 4.18%, or did they maybe take some credit risk here?
The issue is that we're all markets heading into this really critical event are priced to perfection. I mean, you have equities at the highs mostly, you have credit spreads super tight, and you now have these macro products, both the dollar doing well and rates backing up. In many ways, if you don't get a red sweep or you get any version of gridlock, that's going to be good for the bond market as well as broader markets for the most part. And so we do think that rates would come back down again. So the front end makes sense. The curve steepener still makes sense. Mortgages, volatility has been high, so that's been captured in a wider mortgage spread. So those are the areas I think that are most interesting as we head into next week.
George, you're hypersensitive to a global dynamic, particularly with the Japanese bank MUFG. How correlated is everything right now, or is it just a total mess?
Well, look, there's some breakdown in correlations, but we still take our cue. For example, if boons or gilts were to rally, it's hard for treasuries not to rally. But treasuries have been underperforming every other large developed market bond market for the last 3-4 weeks, and those have limits, I think, and the correlations do come back. But Japan on its own is really largely going its own way and waiting to see, I think, what happens with the election. How many Fed cuts do we get or not? Because then that's going to probably force the BOJ to do.
Well, what are you modeling right now? I mean, George, you've been doing this since time began. You're the full faith and credit guy. What is Jerome Powell going to do in the spring of next year?
You tell me who's going to win next week, and I'll tell you, and I'll give you different scenarios.
Come on, it's not about politics. I mean, everybody at the Fed's going to tell you they're blind to politics. Yes, no, maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But what they got to look at is 2.8%, 3% run rate GDP. We've gotten wrong all year. Economic growth. Does the economic growth subside?
I think, look, if we get a gridlock, a blue gridlock, this is why it's not about politics. It's about the outlook for fiscal policy, right? And if we get a gridlock where there's a Harris win and Republicans are in charge of the Senate, I think not much gets done. It's probably really good for the bond market, but probably bad for the economy. And you probably get some sort of a pullback in government spending. But let's not forget, yesterday's GDP, a big part of it was military defense spending and government spending in general. So that kind of tailwind, if you take it out, can lower growth by about 0.5 to 1% of GDP. So we can't forget that.
George, it is an election year, and both politicians are talking about a lot of different issues. One of the things we don't hear a lot about, but I think is important to the bond market, is at some point do we have to worry about deficits and the national debt and all this kind of stuff? Is that becoming an issue? Is it an issue for the bond market?
Well, that's what I kind of started off with. I mean, there's some term premium, there's some kind of concern around if you get a majority rule either way. But again, people are now expecting majority rule to be read. If you get that, then yes, I think that the next president, whoever that may be, is going to have to start to deal with fiscal sustainability because we're getting super high debt loads. Our interest expense is approaching $1 trillion. And, at some point, it starts to really matter.
George, thank you so much. George Goncalves with this MUFG. I mean, we forget about it, the Fed meeting. There's a November Fed meeting.
That's right. Yep, exactly right. Yeah. And 2 days after the election. And unfortunately, what a lot of the political experts are telling us, Tom, is we're not going to know on the 7th, who's in the White House. And so, see how the Fed looks at the data and reacts.
I'm more in the camp with McKee, where, they're sort of blind to the politics. I get it. There's, I get it and all that. Maybe there'll be a new chairman, but I think it's sort of overwrought. Sort of like a Michael Barr newscast. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom. Paul Lisa. The Los Angeles Dodgers won their second World Series championship in 5 seasons, overcoming a 5-run deficit with the help of Yankees defensive miscues to beat New York 7-6 in Game 5. It appeared Aaron Judge and the Yankees were right back in this World Series in the 5th inning, and then they weren't.
The heating up Judge, who settles under this ball, but then drops it. Can Hernandez get to the bag before the throw? He does. On a routine play, Aaron Judge just flubs it.
Fox Sports with the call. Shortstop Anthony Volpe and ace pitcher Garrett Cole also committed costly mistakes. 5 days are left until Election Day. Yesterday, Kamala Harris spent a lot of time in the battleground state of Pennsylvania. The vice president told a rally that she'll fight for all Americans.
We love our country. And when you love something, you fight for it.
After rallying supporters in North Carolina and a media gaggle from a garbage truck, former President Trump ended his night with a rally in Green Bay, Wisconsin.
My response to Joe and Kamala is very simple. You can't lead America if you don't love Americans. It's true.
Both Trump and Harris will campaign in southwestern states today. President Biden is sending his top Middle East envoys to Israel to discuss a new ceasefire plan in Lebanon. The proposal calls for a 60-day pause in fighting to test a new mechanism to ensure Hezbollah does not get more weapons from Iran and moves farther north from the Israeli border. Finally, happy Halloween. Drivers, please watch out for trick-or-treaters this evening. Last night at the White House.
Distinguished guest, please welcome the President of the United States and First Lady Jill Biden.
The President and First Lady handed out candy to trick-or-treaters at the annual White House Halloween celebration. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
I went back and looked at games with errors, and it's like 1917. It's like Field of Dreams, Shoeless Joe Jackson and all that. And then there's October 25th, 1986. I want Yankee people to feel better. I want them to feel better. The Red Sox had 3 errors in the Bill Buckner game. The Mets enjoyed 2 errors. There were 5 errors in Game 6 of the 1986 World Series.
And then there's Maud, what happened last night, because my goodness.
I mean, the answer, we've never seen this. I mean, it's all. Will there be ramifications, Paul Sweeney? What do you think?
No, unfortunately, no. Well, I'm not going to say unfortunately. They made it to the World Series.
In the control room. Nobody's awake in the control room.
Yeah, unfortunately, no. So I don't think so. But I mean, Judge dropping the ball just never happens. The Volpe throw, who knows? But Garrett Cole not covering first base.
He was exhausted. He looked like he was exhausted.
How can he be exhausted? We're paying him $36 million. He pitches every 5 days. I mean, try getting up at 2 a.m. like Michael Barr does every day.
Could he have beaten the runner to first base on that slow
Of course he could.
I don't think so.
I think he could.
Michael?
Yeah, well, that error is the one that I look at most. Like you said,
the
Paul,
Garrett Cole one.
The Garrett Cole one.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, okay, Aaron.
And it was a hit. Officially, they gave him a hit.
Yeah.
Baloney with that.
But it's like it happens. You drop the ball. It's Aaron Judge and everything. But man, not covering first base,
right.
Not like that, man. That was. Listen, they played hard, but
that is career.
I saw a lot of baseball at Fenway in 1986, and I've always said this. The only reason they got to October 1986 is Bill Buckner carried that team on his shoulders in September of 1986. He's always got a really bad rap on that. Guess what? There's 114 days to first game spring training.
Lakeland.
Every year. Can you talk to Sparta? Can we just finally get this budgeted?
It's
like a no-brainer. We go down to Steinbrenner with Sweeney's, cloud.
Sure.
Lisa's show. The whole team goes. I mean, we take the entire team, 12 people.
All right, I'll talk to Sparta on that one.
We're going to take the camper, or are we going to take the?
We got the Gulfstream.
Get the Airstream and the Gulfstream. Yeah. We'll rent the Airstream down there. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you, particularly to our team members who are really into baseball much more than I'm into it. Particularly Ari's been leading the way on that, and Cy Benson has been really, really helpful on it as well. Paul, Apple this afternoon, are we going to get the same treatment as Microsoft?
I don't know. I think, on the margin. Boy, if you don't blow the numbers out, Tom, it seems like, and which makes sense. These things are at all-time highs. They're trading at huge multiples. If you don't blow out the numbers, you're going to see the stock get hit. We saw that with Meta and Microsoft here today.
We're getting hit over the head. Sebastian emails in. Thanks for listening, Sebastian. Stroman paid $37 million to not throw a single pitch in the postseason. What happened?
I don't know. Only the Yankees can do that.
I am still upset. $37 million, and the whole Tigers' payroll is $18.8 million.
Detroit. That's all I can say. Detroit. There you go.
I'm done.
They had a good year. Hey, your Lions
Lisa,
are still in it.
sports talk?
Softball season.
I'm over it.
Okay. Thank you. We'll leave it at that. Lisa Mateo is
She's
so over it. Good morning, everyone.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
The Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio. I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures slumping. This is ahead of Apple and Amazon earnings later this afternoon. Let's get to the tech-heavy NASDAQ futures. Down 0.8%, 174 points. Dow futures down 0.5%, 222 points. S&P futures down 0.6%, or 40 points. We have the two-year yield, 4.18%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year, 4.28%, and that's down 1 basis point. To currencies, a dollar stronger. Japanese yen, have to point out, up 0.3% at 152.82 against the dollar. With the euro, British pound stronger. Bitcoin down about 0.8%, but at 72,000. Shares of Carvana getting a nice boost. They're up 19%. Higher than expected result for the most recent quarter. Growing used car sales. Cost cutting that really pushed a better outlook for the rest of the year. And you have Clorox raised its annual profit guidance. Higher ad spend boosted sales. And finally, Samsung announced progress in supplying its most advanced AI memory chips to NVIDIA. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. Bloomberg Surveillance this morning were brought to you by Interactive Brokers Trade. Over 10,000 U.S. stocks and ETFs, U.S. equity index options, U.S. treasuries, and more on your timetable. Learn more at ibkr.com/around the clock. You spell out around the clock. ibkr.com/around the clock. There is a survey. Yeah, somebody asked me, they stopped me in the street yesterday. They said, is there a survey there where we can say Tom Keene sucks? I said, yes, that question.
Does that work?
It's
Okay.
in the survey.
It's in the survey.
Joe Matthew insisted that was in there. There's a survey, youtube.com/Bloomberg podcast. Thank you, Material, for doing this survey. This is a dead serious survey, folks. We're fascinated by the future of digital distribution of radio. We want your input. Yes, there's a question. We love Lisa Mateo. I get it. Enough of that. It's, again, youtube.com/Bloomberg podcast. Go take our important surveys. No question about that. Paul, the survey is like, I mean, we're over-surveyed. I'm over-surveyed.
Sure.
Except this one's like in English.
I know. It's just kind of, what do you want to see on Bloomberg Radio? We'll get it to you. So it's on Bloomberg. You get that YouTube thing, and that's how it works. So we're all good.
We'll see here.
All right.
Let's go. Right on the screen, -40 here right now. -40 on SPX. Dow -3. I guess it's like a Microsoft effect. We got Dan Ives coming up in 20 minutes.
And he's going to be pounding the table on Microsoft.
Well, we'll push against that. I'm going to say, okay, Dan, forget with a happy talk. Joining us right now, he came in this morning and he's wearing his fire vest. It was the same fire vest he had on when Buckner had that error in 1986. I mean, that's what Joe Matthews, you have a chance to watch the game last night as a diehard Red Sox fan.
Yeah, I'm just waiting to see how the Boston Herald is going to treat this whole thing. Look, you're asking the wrong guy. I think for those listening on 92.9 this morning, there might have been a couple of spurts last night around the fifth inning, but that's the way it goes.
What are you focused on today? I mean, we're trying to get over this. I got to play LA music here to get out of the show today. What are you and Katie Lines focused on specifically today, Joe?
On the cosplay campaign. I had my vest on because it's Halloween. Happy Halloween to both of you. To see the multi-billionaire show up dressed like a garbage man last night was remarkable. Only days after we saw him dressed up like a McDonald's worker wearing the apron. He drove around in a garbage truck even. And it's really gotten to the point here where this race is so tied up, 50-50. Nobody has a clue of what's going to happen next week. So we're seeing the campaigns reach for optics, reach for celebrities, anything that will get us to talk about them. And Donald Trump in the last 24 hours seems to be winning that battle, if it matters.
Yeah. And Joe, what do you think? What's the thinking within Washington, D.C. about the timing? When will we have any kind of resolution to this and really have someone be able to call the winner or loser?
Well, look, in terms of calling a winner or a loser, this is something that's probably going to take days. I will be honest with you. We've been hearing more people on the program speak more optimistically because there won't be as many early ballots to count as we had during COVID. But this has to do with state-to-state procedures, the hand counting of ballots, the transferring of ballots. You look at Arizona, guys, when we get out to the West Coast next Tuesday night, we could be in for the long haul.
That's what Guerra said. Guerra said weeks ago, like Arizona is what he's focused focused on. Joe, the charm of balance of power, unlike the cable TV dance, the cable radio dance, I should say, is Joe, you guys talk to operatives. You talk to actual people committing campaign. What do those kind of people say? Not people wearing a fancy suit. What are the people in the trenches? What's the observation they give you?
Well, I'm really glad that you brought that up because, yes, we like to talk to practitioners more than we like to talk to partisans. And the people who are actually in the field, who are talking to people, are the ones who really don't have a sense of what's going to happen. And they're very concerned that the sample's broken because polls are based on the last election, the way they curve things, the algorithm that they put on these numbers. And so Nate Silver put it best today, if you want to talk about somebody who's in the trench here. Trump and Harris, he wrote, are a polling error away each from a blowout. This could go 5 points in either direction on the presidential level. On the House level, it could go 5 seats in either direction. And that is why next week is going to be such a slog.
Get out the vote, Joe, is a theme we've heard from a lot of folks here. Is there any sense that the people will come out and vote here? What do we think about turnout here? What are the campaigns saying?
Based on early voting, this is going to be a big number. More than a third of Americans have already early voted, and we've seen Republicans show up to the dance in a way that we haven't before in states, not including Arizona, where that's been the case for a long time. But look at the numbers in North Carolina. Look at Pennsylvania, Michigan. This is a big deal. By the way, North Carolina ends their early voting process today. And even after the hurricane, guys, we spoke with a member of this is the Secretary of State, rather, from North Carolina 2 days ago. After Hurricane Helene just wiped out a good chunk of the western part of the state, they had to move polling locations and change hours. They have actually exceeded expectations in the early vote because people are that dialed in. We could have a record next week.
Off the radar, Joe, and I'm an amateur on this, folks. I beg if I'm wrong. There's federal people that can go observe election sites in all 50 states. Is that under threat, Joe Matthew?
The Trump campaign doesn't like it. This is, by the way it normally goes, where they kind of drop
Yeah, but
in
it's
to
been
see
that way
people are
since
being
John
served and
Adams
so
in
forth.
1802,
That's
right?
correct. Now they're being framed as bad guys, not unlike the FEMA workers who were rolling in to help people in the aforementioned North Carolina. We have over 165 preemptive lawsuits already filed, and what we saw yesterday, another one from the Trump campaign in Pennsylvania, Bucks County. People were out there waiting for a long time to drop mail-in ballots. That's how they do it there. They don't have in-person voting in the same way. And so there was some fire on social media. The Trump campaign files a lawsuit, and they extended the deadline. So it is actually changing voting procedures as we speak.
Okay, one final question, and Paul wanted me to ask this. Dave Roberts played 45 games for the Boston Red Sox, and the only reason they got into the World Series in 2004 was a stolen base. When Dave Roberts goes into the Hall of Fame for the Dodgers, should he be wearing a Red Sox uniform?
What's the question? Should he what?
Should he be wearing a Red Sox uniform? I mean, I think so.
I don't know. How much money would that cost?
I mean, it's a commitment to the Red Sox was extraordinary. Joe, thank you so much.
What's the lesson that we learned on money in baseball last night? That's what I'm thinking about this morning.
Yep.
That's true.
Good point.
That's a good point. Joe Matthews, the Red Sox have the money, but they're not spending it. Juan Soto in Boston. Sounds like a good idea.
Sounds like a good idea.
Joe Matthews, thank you so much. With Kaylee Lyons tonight, Balance of Power, 12 noonish, getting us to the election and beyond. Dave Roberts just sits there like Yoda.
Yeah,
you know,
it works.
It's just amazing.
But again, I guess as Joe was just suggesting, boy, all the money on both payrolls for the Yankees and the Dodgers, at least this year, it showed, money works in baseball. It's not always.
It'll be interesting to see the ratings.
Yeah,
I mean,
I think the ratings will be monster. Yeah.
And what does that mean for the streamers?
Well, Fox wanted more games. They only got, they didn't get 7 games. So.
But does it mean the streamers start bidding ever more once they see that extravaganza?
Oh, I think so.
Got to.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm editorializing. The World Series for Amazon's a rounding error?
Yeah,
is that
totally.
Absolutely.
Their whole video business is a rounding error.
Yeah, we'll see. We got to play. We'll go in the next hour. We're going to go through the ticker tape parade in L.A. It's lame. The Beach Boys.
We're going on safari to the islands. learning now, everybody's learning how. Come on a safari with me.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Why are we upset if we're creating jobs?
Inflation's still a thing out there for the everyday consumer.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
The economic calendar jam-packed today.
And Michael Barr with news.
Tensions between the U.S. and China have heated up even more.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney, Tom Keene, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo is back, coming in on the Gulfstream last night. Lisa, did you have a chance to watch the game? Your thoughts on the dreaded Yankees? Thank you, Lisa Mateo. Very good to have it. She's over there. You see, when she doesn't know, when she goes away, you and I are over here having full English.
Exactly.
We're in the sausage, the thing that I can't eat, the British thing that Pharaoh chows down.
That's how we do it.
She comes in here. She just came in the studio with the granola.
We got our
yogurt
granola
thing
and our yogurt
as well. Big interview coming up with Dan Ives here in a moment. We'll get to that. Let's get right to what we're doing. We're on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. On your commute, we say good morning across the nation from Dan Ives to Pat Sajak. We're like tuned in. Thank you on Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, and the rest. And it's sort of like an exciting time. Did you stay up, Sweeney, or did you sleep?
I did. The fifth inning just crushed me, though. So I don't know.
I was asleep, and then Mrs. Keene woke me up. She's learning baseball. And she goes, can Garrett Cole go back in the game?
Right, exactly.
Oh, there's a lot to learn. Let's go. Bloomberg Surveillance this morning brought to you by Cohn Resnick. The Cohn Resnick picked the Dodgers. Cohn Resnick Advisory Assurance Tax. Discover game-changing strategies to maximize value, optimize performance, and manage risk. Put your business at the forefront. We thank Cohn Resnick for original commitment to our conversations here at Bloomberg Surveillance. From the Interactive Broker Studios, the Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
You got it. NASDAQ futures leading the losses right now, down 0.7%. This after earnings from two tech giants. Well, they really failed to impress investors. We're talking about shares of Microsoft. They're down about 3%. Profit revenue top forecast, but it forecasts slower quarterly cloud revenue growth. And then shares of Meta down 2%. After the bell, we're on to Apple and Amazon. Over to NASDAQ futures, down 0.7%, 161 points. We have Dow futures down 0.5%, 215 points. S&P futures down 0.6%. We have the 2-year yield 4.18%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year 4.28%. That's down 1 basis point. To earnings, Cigna up more than 1%. Reported third quarter earnings topped expectations. Then you have Merck. Merck down nearly 1%, lowered its top-end full-year sales guidance. Its demand for its HPV vaccine, well, that fell for a second straight quarter in China. And Estee Lauder, wow, their share ADR down 20%, pulled its guidance for the year. That was due to uncertainty in China. It also cut its dividend. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Best tweet by far last night. We're watching the game. Vet Bill's going nuts because one of his heroes is in the game. Pat Sajak, Wheel of Fortune's in the background there.
I saw that.
No cell
Nice
phone.
seats.
He's watching every pitch, old school. I thought he was keeping score. His tweet, noticed I was trending, thought I had passed away. Turns out I'm fine. So I'm watching, and then like 2 minutes later, the camera pans over the dugout, and there's Dan Ives at the game. He's got the rock star tickets.
He does, of course.
Dan Ives joins us now with a report from Yankee Stadium. How was that fifth inning, Mr. Ives?
That was a brutal fifth inning as a Yankee fan. But it was wild to watch. Congrats to the Dodgers, but just an exciting night at the stadium.
Spin the Wheel of Fortune right now for Amazon and Apple this afternoon. After what you've seen in Mag 7, what's the Wheel of Fortune look like for those two stocks this afternoon?
I think Wheel of Fortune's bullish, specifically for Amazon on the cloud side. I think that's going to be the upside there, as well as advertising. And for Apple, as we've talked about, this will be a better than expected iPhone number. And I think optimistic in terms of Cook going into what I believe is just going to be a monster December holiday season for iPhone 16 and AI driving that.
Yeah, I upgraded, so I got to figure everybody else is too. It took me 5 years to upgrade. How about let's go back to Microsoft last night. I thought the number was solid across the board. I mean, and I know people are a little bit concerned about maybe their cloud business. Give us your read on our friends from Microsoft.
Paul, I mean, I'm more bullish today than I was 24 hours ago. I think it's a pound the table because Azure, you're seeing growth accelerating from an AI perspective. I think Street will kind of try to pick hairs here, split hairs in terms of the numbers. This is one you walk away more bullish. I would be shocked if this is a stock that's not up 24 hours from now, given what we see in terms of core numbers.
So how do you think about the Microsoft story, and specifically in the cloud? Just give us a sense of their competitive positioning versus Amazon versus Google and some of the other players there.
Sure. So to give perspective, let's say a year ago, no growth essentially from AI that's attributed to Azure, maybe 1%. Today, 12% of the growth is AI driven. So in terms of their backyard on the enterprise, 34% growth, AI is driving that. Now others are getting in on that party. Google, I see what we'll see from Amazon tonight. But it just speaks to the AI revolution. It's only the second inning as this all plays out. And you look at Meta, look at that CapEx. I mean, they're spending money like a 1980s rock star, but that's great for NVIDIA and great for AI.
I mean, Dan, foreigners are loving the growth. And I think American Wall Street said, well, look, we took the CFA, we did this course. This isn't good. I got a PE on Microsoft of 35. I got a forward PE to June of next year of 33-ish. To me, the issue which you're good at, and even people less optimistic than you are good at, is the x-axis. How do we treat the terminal value of our analysis of the Mag 7?
What would happen if Dodgers didn't spend the last 2 years? Do they have a chip right now? The point is, you look at what's happening in terms of where this is all going. I mean, in my opinion, some of the parts, the AI piece could ultimately add $30 to $40 per share. As this all plays out in terms of the story, because I think the street is underestimating the next 2, 3, 4 years of free cash flow, growth, and what AI ultimately is going to do to the story.
I mean, help me with Call of Duty. They just came out with it here. I saw up 61% for that. Nobody talks about this, and I just think it's an absolute sleeper. The new Call of Duty's killing it, right? Black Ops 6.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, look, if you look at Activision, I mean, what they've done there, I mean, there's so many growth levers in the Microsoft story, more than we've ever seen. Leading AI, you got Activision in back pocket, and now what you're really seeing is just a massive upgrade across enterprise, which is bullish for Google, bullish for Amazon, and of course, very bullish for Godfather of AI, Jensen, NVIDIA. And the last piece of that puzzle is the consumer AI revolution we hear from Cupertino tonight and Cook.
I mean, Paul, the zombies, the Liberty Falls zombies in the new Call of Duty. Mm-hmm. I was on that for like 2 hours last night.
Oh, I'm sure you were. When you're not on the Gram or on Facebook. Meta Platforms, let's switch gears there, Dan. That's been kind of the best performing, a big cap stock here, up 67% year to date. Digital advertising, it's still a thing, isn't it?
I mean, that's the hearts and lungs of the story. And I think now you could criticize them for what they're going to spend CapEx in terms of AI, but that's the next lever of the growth story. So when you look at Meta, I think we're only sort of still in the early days of this growth transformation. And that's very important as this all plays out. We see from them, see from Google,
right?
I think we'll see from Amazon as well.
So you got a paragraph, like in, CFA 101, risk factors. What's Dan? I mean, you're wicked bullish. I get it. People making fun. You're a pinata, Dan. I mean, were people coming up with you last night asking for price targets on Microsoft, like in the sixth inning?
I will tell you when I was going to get a beverage at the Yankees game, and someone said, "Hey, should I be worried about Apple?"
There you go.
So there is some nervousness, but again, that just creates the opportunity. This is a tech bull market that's going to go on.
Okay, but what's your lead?
Months.
We got to go. What's your lead risk factor here on Apple or Amazon today? There's a paragraph. Dan Ives' major risk factor is?
Lead risk factor is just good, but maybe conservative guidance. Street will kind of read into that knee jerk. That just creates the golden buying opportunity to pound the table.
How do the Mets look next year, Dan? Got to go. How do the Mets look?
I'm optimistic on Mets. Hopefully Mets, they'll be in the World Series.
Oh, come on. Steve Cohen, Juan Soto, match made in heaven.
Exactly.
Thank you, Dan Ives, with Wedbush as well. It's going to be fascinating where he ends up.
Yeah, exactly. He's going to. I don't know, how much money is he going to get? Wow.
I don't know. I sent an email to the Baltimore Orioles, and I said,
we know a guy there, don't we?
Yeah, they could lift. I mean, okay. I could see one out there as well. We'll get Mindy, and she'll straighten us out on that. Dan Ives, thank you so much, and thank you for your constructive comments here. Many people pushing against Mr. Ives' optimism at Wedbush. Speaking of optimism, with our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom. Paul, Lisa, celebrations erupted among Dodgers fans last night as Los Angeles overcame a 5-run deficit to beat the New York Yankees 7-6 and win the World Series. Dodgers first baseman Freddie Freeman was named series MVP.
Seems like we hit every speed bump possible over the course of this year, and to overcome what we did as a group of guys, it's special.
Freeman slugged 4 home runs and 12 RBIs in the Fall Classic. Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Trump held competing events last night in Wisconsin, an important swing state in the presidential race. Both candidates rolling out celebrity endorsements to excite voters. Harris receiving a nod yesterday from the Terminator himself, former California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger. Meanwhile, Trump at a rally in Green Bay getting an endorsement from Packers great Brett Favre.
You know the definition of insanity. I think we all know it. It's doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results.
Today, Trump and Harris will campaign in the southwestern states. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin says North Korean troops have been outfitted with Russian uniforms and equipment, and there is a good likelihood that those troops will be involved in the war in Ukraine. Austin says Ukraine can use U.S.-provided weapons.
Ukrainian soldiers have the right to defend themselves, and they will do that. With the weapons that we provided and others have provided, that's to be expected.
Secretary Austin met at the Pentagon with South Korea's defense minister. Washington says thousands of North Korean fighters could be on the front lines within weeks. North Korea has launched a new intercontinental ballistic missile in its first test in almost a year of a weapon designed to threaten the U.S. mainland and occurring days ahead of the U.S. election. North Korean media said leader Kim Jong-un ordered today's missile test to show North Korea's resolve to respond to its enemy's move. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
It's not the same. The Los Angeles Dodgers announced their parade route
Yeah, where do they go?
It's south of 101, which is packed. I mean, it'll be like, 8 cars deep. City Hall to Grand Avenue. I mean, it's not there's no skyscrapers to ticker tape because all the skyscrapers are modern and the windows are closed. So you can't do ticker tape.
But it'll be
it's different.
Beautiful weather.
And then they wandered over to Chavez Ravine, and there's, refreshments.
Okay.
Gates open at 8:30 or 9. By the time Freddie Freeman walks into Dodger Stadium, there's going to be 50,000 people flat on their ass.
Oh my, yeah, they're going to be still throwing confetti just somewhere somehow after beverages.
It was great. It was great to see Magic Johnson out in that field last night. I mean, he's the one. His commitment to that team
and to that
years ago with all that money turned it around. Anyways, we'll have continuing coverage of this great sport. This is Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
In the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures extending their declines, the busiest day of earnings this season. About 60 companies expected to open their books today. We'll get to some of them right now. We'll start with Uber, down 7%, weaker than expected ride bookings, issued a muted holiday forecast, even as it delivered a record profit. Then you have Bristol Myers, their shares, well, they're up about 2%. Third quarter earnings revenue blew past expectations. Strong sales from its blood thinner Eliquis, also a number of new drugs, and Roblox shares up 14%, boosted its full year bookings forecast, beating estimates. We'll get to the tech-heavy NASDAQ futures down 0.7%, 143 points. Dow futures down 0.4%, 173 points. S&P futures down about 0.5%. We have the two-year yield 4.17%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year 4.28%, and that's down 2 basis points. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
She's no John Tucker. I mean, she just killed that data check.
Yeah.
She went to Karen Moscow University.
Yep, that's where you go.
That's where you go. She's crushed it. Lisa Mateo, thank you. Welcome back. I just did a news flow thing in the zeitgeist that's out there from the New York Times a few days ago. Is Harris courts Republicans, the left grows wary and alienated. Teaching Alienated 101 at Brown University, Wendy Schiller joins us right now, expert on our American civics. Is Vice President Harris moving to the middle, Professor Schiller?
Well, she hasn't been particularly specific about the programs or policies that she'll enact. She's talked about continuing, all the good things that Biden has done, at least the things that appeal to the Democratic Party and even centrist voters. I think the looming policy issue is the tax cuts, right? I mean, the Trump tax cuts will expire. I think both parties and both presidents, whoever it is, will extend those tax cuts in some way, shape, or form. How much of the burden falls on the very wealthy and how much of the burden falls on sort of upper middle class? I think that's the big question. And I'm not sure Harris has persuaded those people who you might call, wealthy, but don't think of themselves as wealthy. And if they're worried that their taxes will go up, that's that sort of suburban voter sweet spot that Biden managed to get in 2020. And that's, I think, who she's struggling with now.
Down ballot Sweeney wants to go there, but let me get one more issue in here on Harris. What's the timeline for Wendy Schiller this close to the actual election? Or should we be anticipating big events by the two candidates, or is that time gone?
No, I mean, I think Trump certainly, I remember this with Mitt Romney, too, in 2012. The crowd size grew and grew towards the end of the election cycle. And that could either be really great enthusiasm for Trump or an idea by some of the people in his fan base that he may lose. So they want to see him one last time. So I have no idea what accounts for that growth in size. But, each campaign must believe this is neck and neck, because they are, traipsing across the entire country, continuing to try to win votes up until the very last minute, which means their internal polling, I would suspect, tells them that it is really neck and neck and based on turnout.
Are we going to wake up Wednesday morning, Professor, and know who the president is?
I think if Trump sweeps, if the polls really are still underestimating Trump by about 3 percentage points, then he's likely to tilt all the swing states in his direction. And I think we're going to get signs of that by Wednesday morning. I'm just not sure the results will be certified. Certainly Pennsylvania, they take a while. Arizona takes a while. Michigan says it's going to take a while. So I think it might be a while before it's all certified. But if he really has big leads before the mail-in ballots are counted and they look insurmountable, I think we're going to have a pretty good idea. But I don't think Harris will win that way. So if she wins, I think it's going to be more narrow, and it may take a couple of days to determine that.
If it's more narrow for the Harris campaign, is it fair to assume that the Trump campaign will look to block and look to sue and look to really challenge to the nth degree?
Yeah, well, they did it in 2020, right? I think nearly 60 court cases. So yeah, they'll be challenging every step of the way. And there are a lot more Biden federal district court judges than there used to be. But there's still a combination going all the way back to Bush, Clinton, Obama, Trump, and Biden judges in the federal system. They all rejected, accusations of, electoral misdeeds or vote counting misdeeds. So at least enough to swing the election. So I think certainly the Trump campaign will contest. He never conceded the 2020 defeat. So we can expect that all the way through January 20th if it turns out that Kamala Harris is certified and has won the Electoral College.
Are we seeing or hearing anything from the vice presidential candidates, or is that just not relevant today? We should just be focusing on the two presidential candidates.
I think the principles, I think this has always been about the principles. Okay. You have a former president and then you have a vice president. But I also think their VPs are underwhelming, right? Vance did pretty well in the debate against Waltz, but I don't think you would call him a strong asset. And Waltz did badly in that debate. Again, I don't think you'd call him a strong asset. So I think they're on purpose. They're laying them on the low side. And I think the Democrats failed to capitalize on making J.D. Vance an issue given Trump's age. So that moment has passed. So now I think it's just all about the principles.
So I don't even know where to go. The House or the Senate, Professor Schiller, up in the air. And, I really don't care about the 18 opinions out there. Which body is most important to President Trump or President Harris, the House or the Senate?
The House. And I think you know this, like it's a rhetorical question there, Tom, because of its power.
In the Brown timeout chair, Lisa, take over I'm going to sit back here in the back of the room.
No, I'm not chastising. I'm saying that I think I think those of us who follow fiscal politics understand constitutionally the House originates revenue, taxation, spending bills. And to keep the economy afloat and the government going and make sure those tax cuts go through and also make sure the debt limit gets increased and avoid government shutdowns, you need the House. The Senate can block exactly as the constitutional founders expected, but they can't really technically originate. And if the House, decides to shut the government down, then the government's going to shut down or fail to pass the debt limit. So the House, to me, is crucial to either president. And I think if people are concerned about a Trump victory, but they want to moderate Trump, then the House going Democratic, I think serves that purpose.
Wendy, we haven't heard that much from President Biden during this campaign. Any reason for that to change or to differ between now and Election Day?
Well, I think we heard a little bit off the cuff the other day, and the Harris campaign freaked out. So I think they'd be very happy if Joe Biden went to, Delaware, went to the beach, or just, hung out and kept his mouth shut. I think that's, an ungracious way of treating the man that chose you as vice president, but it's a political and campaign reality for the Harris campaign right now.
Professor, thank you so much. Wendy Schiller of Brown University has been a foundation to our coverage here. Look for her civics textbook. It is just absolutely iconic within American education. Of course, we'll have her in here through, across other many Bloomberg platforms as well, with the Taubman Center at Brown University as well. Paul, my head's spinning over news flow. We're here at 8:24 Wall Street time.
Yep.
Did you know there's a jobs report tomorrow?
There is. All right, I will come in tomorrow.
Remember,
for that.
we were totally fixated 28 days ago or 29 days ago.
Yes, we were.
Well.
I mean, I'm just looking, again, change in non-farm payrolls. It's going to be a squirrely month. We know the consensus is an addition of 101,000. Again, remember, last period was an addition of 254,000. But this month, we've got hurricanes and we've got strikes and all kinds of things that are going to make this number a little dicey. So this is the time when you want to rely on the Michael McKees of the world to kind of put this non-farm payroll number into context.
Yeah, and again, Anna Wong out with a terse note yesterday with Bloomberg Economics, and her delta's 150,000 off the two hurricanes.
Yeah, exactly.
So, like, folks, to translate that, I'm speaking as an amateur, you get 300,000 non-farm payrolls, but she says they're going to knock off 150 down to 150,000.
Could be, yeah. I'm just not sure how to play
and
this.
She said it's squishy.
Right, squishy, that's the term, yeah. Unemployment rate still forecast to be right around 4.1%. Average hourly earnings looking to grow on a year-on-year basis at about 4%, which is consistent with last month. So earnings are rising, Tom, and they've been rising more than inflation for the last 18, 24 months.
Is Porcelli today or tomorrow?
I don't know. I think we've got him today. He may be coming in today.
Yeah. I mean, this is a really important interview with Tom Porcelli about wage growth. Because we've just completely gotten wrong growth this year. I got it wrong.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Never did I think 3%, 2.8% run rate.
Yeah, we had Matt Winkler in a week or so ago talking about the fact that real wages have gone up and faster than inflation, and that's reflected, but it doesn't feel that way to a lot of Americans out there, and that's what you have to deal with.
We'll have to see. Bloomberg Surveillance, subscribe to us out on YouTube. That's our most important distributor right now. We are thrilled to have you on YouTube with us. YouTube live chat, check it out. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We are just moments away from more economic data. So ahead of it, let's check in with NASDAQ futures. Down 0.6%, 124 points. We have Dow futures. They're down about 0.4%, 182 points. We have S&P futures down about 0.5% or 33 points. As far as the economic data, well, my screen is starting to light up like a Christmas tree. So let's get to it. I want to start, we'll go with PCE price index. That's what we'll start there. As far as that, well, actually, no, we'll go to initial jobless claims because that number is popping up first. The survey was for 230,000, coming in at 216,000. The prior was for 227,000. That was revised up to 228,000. This all comes ahead of tomorrow's jobs report. Now we'll get to the PCE price index. If we go month to month, the survey was for up 0.2%, right on target. Same there. The prior was for up about 0.1%. And then we go to core PCE. The survey was for 0.3%, came in right on target as well. The prior was for about 0.1%. All right, some stocks on the move. We'll get to Roku, down 13%. It said it's no longer reporting the number of households that use its products each quarter. Robinhood, down 10%, reported revenue missed estimates. eBay, down 6%. Its holiday season sales forecast fell short of estimates. And finally, MasterCard, their earnings came in up about 1%. Adjusted earnings per share, third quarter beat estimates. Comes after that beat a few days ago from Visa. As far as a reaction on Wall Street, well, you still have NASDAQ futures down 0.6%, Dow futures down 0.4%, S&P futures down 0.5%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Lots of red and green blinking on the screen. We use the Bloomberg Launchpad off the terminal to look at equities, bonds, currencies, commodities, a little bit of currency strength. Yields up. The Sweeney yield, I noted, the 2-year yield 4.19%, but just sort of a churn to the market. We're waiting for revisions, which are important. Again, initial jobless claims, 216,000. I'm going to assume affected somehow by the hurricanes as well. More data tomorrow. The jobs report at 8:30 tomorrow will go beneath the headline data. Our economic indicators brought to you by Commonwealth. Join over 2,000 independent financial advisors. They are taking control of their growth with advisor-centric support and future-ready technologies. Grow on your own terms with a partner dedicated to your success. Go to commonwealth.com to learn how. We thank Commonwealth for their commitment to all that we're doing. Brian Levitt with us now, Chief Market Strategist, Invesco. Good morning to you. You walked in and you said you're really not focused on the election. Get us beyond the election. Frankly, get us beyond the inauguration. What does that do to give you confidence to participate in the equity markets?
Yeah, I always tell people that the things I like to focus on is the direction of the economy and what the Federal Reserve is going to do. And so I try to avoid a lot of the other noise that enters unless the outcomes to certain things meaningfully change the direction of the economy or what the Fed's going to do. And I think the latest reports, the numbers that were just read, are very consistent with what we're seeing, which is a resilient economy and inflation in the comfort zone. And so that's a nice backdrop for risk assets, and very little to suggest that this is an economy that's losing steam. And so, it's a backdrop in which equities are still likely to be favored.
Earnings matter. As a former equity analyst, I like to think earnings matter. It's not just the Fed. What have you seen so far from this earnings cycle? What do you think the market needs to see?
Well, there's been a lot of focus on the mega caps, and it's been a little bit mixed with the mega caps, and yet the irony of it is you're seeing the numbers come in with double-digit growth, just perhaps slightly below what the expectation was, or maybe a little bit of weaker guidance. The reality is those names which have been driving the markets right now are multi-year stories. It's hard to look at them as a quarter-over-quarter story. They're multi-year. We do.
Why do we? Is it just the industry?
Yeah, it's just the industry.
Something to do?
Yeah, I mean, because it's sentiment gets out ahead of itself, and we either rear it back in or take it further. But the reality is those are companies you should be looking at over multi-year periods. But in terms of thinking about it tactically, yeah, good economic backdrop.
Let's go to Paul Sweeney on this. I'm going to ask right now if I can do the math. I'm waiting for the gerbil to move. I got to pay the terminal.
I know.
I'm behind on it. There's 69 opinions on Microsoft.
Yeah.
Paul Sweeney, Do we need 69 opinions on any given stock?
No, that just goes to the inefficiencies of Wall Street here. Do we need 69 voices on Microsoft? Probably not. Maybe 10 of them are getting paid, probably. Brian, talk to us about kind of some.
Whoa, there was a little. Whoa,
Exactly.
there was a little bit of folks inside baseball.
Yeah,
there from
exactly
Mr.
right.
Sweeney. Continue.
What have you seen here? What are some of the sectors that screen well for you guys? If the economy is generally in a pretty good space, rates are coming down, what sectors screen well for you guys?
Yeah, if you believe that we're going to get through this environment, with the economy intact and rates coming down, you want to be more cyclical in your exposure. And so, we've had a period of here where our tactical indicators said, be a little bit more defensive in here. Things are going to be a little bit challenged in the short term, but I think that looking out into 2025, more of a pickup in activity with rates coming down, and that should favor the more cyclical parts of the economy.
Financials? What's the call on financials? Because I saw some Jamie Dimon, Brian Moynihan putting up some big numbers this quarter.
Numbers, and we would expect M&A activity to pick up, some animal spirits, and this normalization of the yield curve, which certainly helps the banks.
Is cash an asset? It's really what it comes down to in terms of people's. Let's assume most people are behind SPX this year. What do you do with cash? How do you deploy right now?
I mean, the funny thing, Tom, is we've been telling people to get out of cash now for a year and a half.
Right.
So I guess
that worked out.
At some point, well, look, I mean, the S&P 500 up 20-something% this year. The cash looks good. The problem you have with it, of course, is the reinvestment risk. And, every time yields come down, you think investors lost their chance to lock in the 4 or 5%. And I guess this is the third bite at that apple. I do think that rates are going to moderate. I think rates are probably a buy here, and so investors sitting in cash will at some point find yields coming down significantly below the short rate and below the long rate, and you'll want to have been exposed to things like credit or things like longer duration treasuries.
How about credit risk here? How much credit risk do I want to take? Because in fixed income space this year,
are spreads still like record tight?
Super tight, right? Yeah.
Spreads are tight, but yields are reasonably attractive, and the fundamentals look quite good. I mean, usually when you look at, you're going into a worrisome credit backdrop, you usually see double-digit borrowing growth. We're nowhere near that right now.
We got a metal bar, folks, around our desk here. We have the nicest radio studio in all of radio done. It's got fancy screens up here, and
thanks, Anthony.
It's really, and what you don't know is the metal bar is here to take our heart rate. The average heart rate of Mateo, Levitt, and Sweeney is like a 49. And it's Lisa, help me here. Peloton's up 25%.
Pre-market.
And they just announced a new CEO.
New CEO? They go from 160 to 3.
I know.
You told me to buy. I remember you telling me to buy. I did not. I mean, Brian Levitt, you're so. Do I need the Bike Plus from Peloton? Is that the new Peloton, the way to go here?
Well, I mean, I think as long as you eat healthy and you move, that's my advice.
Mateo. She eats healthy and she moves.
Regardless of how we do it.
But sitting on bar stool in an Irish pub, that's not the way to go.
It doesn't seem like the best approach, but
That's how I'm going, Lisa.
Seems like the fun approach.
Is the exuberance there at Invesco across a huge platform you have? Is there individual stock exuberance to pick on PTON? Or to pick on Microsoft or Apple, Amazon today? Are people engaged in the market or not? I don't see it.
They're not. I mean, it's not the irrational exuberance that you usually see at the end of cycles. There's still a lot of money. I mean, you can look at $17 trillion in deposits. You can look at $6.5 trillion in money markets. That's a lot of money that's still sitting there. I talk to our portfolio managers every time I go and grab a cup of coffee. They seem pretty optimistic at what they're looking at. And, I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that you coming off of a year in which things were good, but concentrated in a handful of names, versus if you bring rates down, the economy stays resilient. That broadens out to other parts of the market that have not participated. And whether you look at things like mid-cap or more value-oriented parts of the market, those portfolio managers are excited.
And Brian, we don't care. The only reason we had you in, we needed an outside expert on Penn State, Ohio State.
He's
so
a
it's
Michigan
a rebuilding year at Michigan.
It is.
I mean, come on, the Nittany Lions 7-0, but against the Heritage, the juggernaut of the Buckeyes. What do you think?
I think I'm going Buckeyes on this one, but
probably pretty. I don't know. I'm going to stick with my Penn State.
You're going Penn State.
Yeah, I mean, I got a great coach, as my producer will attest, and we'll stick with it. We'll see. But they're always waiting for the Ohio State Michigan game. That's what
even in a
the whole year comes down to for those.
We
guys.
are, and we're going. And if anyone has tickets, let me know because the price on those things are still astronomical.
Where are we playing this year?
We're playing in Columbus.
Oh, okay.
And you're going.
We're going, and we had to fly to Cincinnati and drive to Columbus because it's impossible to get there, and there's no tickets to be found right now.
Wow. See?
Well, they can be found. You're just paying a pretty price for them.
Ohio State, Michigan. That's what it's all about.
Your Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan update there.
Yep,
We
there
thank
you
Brian
go.
Levitt
All
for
things
that
Big Ten.
surveillance. We're rebuilding your correspondent. Brian Levitt, Invesco, thank you so much. And the enthusiasm, really the heart of the matter here on equity strategy, folks, is courage. To be in the market. Speaking of courage, he made it to the 6th inning last night with our news in New York City. Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump rallying voters in key swing states with Election Day on Tuesday. ABC spoke with Harris on the sidelines of her rally yesterday in Raleigh, North Carolina, and was asking Harris how she plans to react if Trump refuses to accept the election results.
If we know that he is actually manipulating the press and attempting to manipulate the consensus of the American people based on fiction instead of fact, we're prepared to respond.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump's focus amplifying President Biden's words, insisting he called his supporters garbage, as the White House says that is not what Biden meant. Trump arriving in battleground Wisconsin in an orange vest, jumping into a garbage truck, his name plastered on the side.
They shouldn't be talking. That's like deplorable for Hillary. This is the deplorable for Hillary. And I think this is worse, actually. For Joe Biden to make that statement, it's really a disgrace.
Trump's campaign has been ready to turn the attention away from their own controversy after comedian Tony Hinchcliffe, invited to speak at a rally, made derogatory comments comparing Puerto Rico to garbage. Trump says he does not know anything about the comedian. Billionaire Elon Musk is expected in court in Philadelphia today after a judge ordered him to attend a hearing in a lawsuit seeking to halt his $1 million giveaways to registered U.S. voters in swing states. Philadelphia's chief prosecutor lodged the suit on Monday, calling Musk's project an illegal lottery scheme. The Los Angeles Dodgers win World Series Game 5, overcoming a 5-run deficit with the help of errors to beat the New York Yankees 7-6. Dodgers manager Dave Roberts talked about superstar player Shohei Ohtani playing through the series with a shoulder injury.
Most guys would probably tap out, but he was going to be not denied at playing and posting and being in the lineup. And so for him to, hoist that World Series trophy, that's something he dreamed of, I'm sure, for quite some time.
Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. Paul Sweeney and Tom Keene looking at the heart of the earnings season here on technology. Paul, what have we learned about technology? You mentioned the banks earlier, and it was like, superb performance by the banks.
I know the market's a little disappointed in some of the numbers coming out of Meta and Microsoft. We're seeing the stocks in the pre-market trading off a few percentage points here, but they've had great runs here. I think the tech spending story obviously is just one you have to have exposure to. I can't imagine this market working without tech leading it. And that's kind of what we've seen over the last 15 years.
We're benumbed by massive double-digit growth.
Yeah,
I mean, you look at the numbers, and it's like none of this was in our training.
No.
It's absolutely
for so
original. Bloomberg Surveillance, and look for our earnings coverage this afternoon with Carol and Tim. Bloomberg Surveillance brought to you by BNY. BNY's expertise, BNY's insights can help clients achieve their ambitions. Visit BNY.com. We're out on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast from your living room, from your office. It's a joint effort. Gather people around the fire and morning coffee on YouTube. Good to have you there. From New York City, Paul Sweeney and Tom Keene, Bloomberg Surveillance.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
In the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures slumping after Microsoft and Meta earnings. We have Microsoft down about 3%, Meta down 1%. On to Apple and Amazon earnings later this afternoon. We have NASDAQ futures down 0.6%, Dow futures down 0.4%, S&P futures down 0.5%. We have the two-year yield, 4.18%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year, 4.29%, and that's down 1 basis point. To currencies, the dollar weaker. Japanese yen up about 0.4% at 152.72 against the dollar. I have to point out Bitcoin at around 72,000. And speaking of which, MicroStrategy has hired banks to help it raise $42 billion to buy more Bitcoin. Shares of Carvana getting a nice boost. They're up 17%, reported higher than expected results for the most recent quarter. Then you have DoorDash. They reported earnings, surpassed expectations, strong guidance for the fourth quarter. Fast food chain Wendy's up 0.5%, matched profit expectations, but a beat on revenue. And finally, Starbucks says starting a week from today, it will no longer charge extra for non-dairy milks, things like soy, almond, and oat milk.
Wow, there's news you can use.
There you go. It costs you 70 or 80 cents extra. Here goes Jess Menton with their coffee.
I covered their earnings yesterday after the bell. I felt bad, so I got a pumpkin spice latte.
Joining us now, our pumpkin spice latte. She's wearing pumpkin this morning. For those of you on radio, Jessica Menton. Quickly here on Stars, what did you pay for that damn drink? I look at what my kids pay. It comes through on the charge card.
Sure it does.
Right.
Well, how much was that?
Probably close to $8.
Oh my God!
Kidding me.
I don't do this every day though. I just, I
But
felt
20
bad
years ago,
yesterday.
you go into the deli and get a cup of coffee for 50 cents. Now we're paying $8.
Joining us now, our Texas correspondent, Jessica Menton, Wall Street Journal. Texas A&M, #1 college in the state, eking out Rice University in Austin.
That's right.
How did this happen? It's not football. I mean, how did this happen?
I mean, we've had a tremendous change and overhaul in the football program, so I feel like the new coach coming in has
had to do with your ranking here of academics.
Yes, because it's motivation. The football team's going great, so then people are more motivated to get the work done and then go to the games on the weekend.
Jessica Menton, thank you so much for our Texas report
Texas
this
A&M.
morning. Take your $8 pumpkin spice, whatever it is. See ya. We all have offspring that are killing us with this. One of my offspring, the middle child, she was given a special card by Starbucks.
Oh yeah,
like some metal,
double secret. Sure.
Super secret faster service.
Yeah, she's got the platinum card.
Jessica Menton, go away. Never has she been in a Starbucks. Julia Pollack joins us now. Chief economist at ZipRecruiter. We love to talk to her. Julia, let me cut to the chase. Are you going to be at the Dodgers celebration today?
Absolutely. I have a 9-year-old son who's completely obsessed with baseball. I spent the summer doing travel ball, and so this is a highlight of his little life. And he's turned me into the biggest fan imaginable as a South African who didn't know anything about baseball a little while ago.
Very cool. Julia, we love talking to you because ZipRecruiter has a different prism. What is the distinction of the job market you see at ZipRecruiter now versus the usual Wall Street writings?
Well, after this last September jobs report, the Wall Street writings were euphoric. The labor market has turned around. It's really too soon to tell. We don't really see that in online job postings that show the labor market continuing to grow, but slow. So that's the picture, still growing but slowing. And there is reason to believe that it will turn around and re-accelerate at some point due to the Fed's rate cuts. We just don't know when.
Julia, tomorrow we're going to get the change in non-farm payrolls. The consensus is for 101,000. And we know there's going to be a lot of noise in that number from hurricanes and strikes and so on and so forth. Can you? Right. How are you thinking about tomorrow's number? How should we as investors think about tomorrow's number?
So I think storms and strikes will have some effect, but what could have a larger effect actually is the weak seasonal hiring that we're seeing this holiday season. So usually employment grows by about 1 million in October's because of holiday hiring. This year, JOLTS openings in retail are the lowest they've been for a September since 2011. Openings in transportation and warehousing are the lowest they've been since 2017 for a September. And so it looks as though this holiday season is off to a kind of slow start. And so seasonal adjustments could show a smaller gain than $1 million as a very low number or even a loss.
Wage growth, I guess on an average hourly earnings basis on a year-on basis, that's how I look at it. 4%, that seems pretty darn solid. How solid is that number?
So here's how economists think about wage growth in sort of little theoretical models. Workers should get rewarded for inflation, or they should be made whole. So that would give them about a 2.2% bump a year. And then they should get an additional bump to reward them for productivity growth. And productivity growth is running at 2.5% right now. So theoretically, 4.5% wage growth is quite consistent with what we're seeing and non-inflationary.
Julia, I looked at the Google earnings, and I'm sitting there with a beverage in my hand at 4:15 East Coast time, and I'm figuring out in my head the expense control, the new expense control religion of tech. What do you see at ZipRecruiter about the new big tech? Are they really cutting jobs, cutting expenses, or is it a fiction?
So tech employment was growing very, very slowly overall, and many categories were actually declining in 2023. In 2024, we've seen a rebound, but it's very, very, very modest. And that growth rate now is much lower than it was during the pandemic and much lower than it was before the pandemic. So tech is still growing very conservatively, very cautiously, and cost control is still the name of the game. But we are seeing an uptick in M&A activity now that the Fed has started cutting rates. Deal making is on the rise. Private equity folks and people in venture capital are starting to get a little bit more of a swagger in their step. So things might turn around in tech in the coming months.
Juliet, I guess talk to us about if you're just coming out of college these days, how's the kind of that market for people? Because, I mean, as parents, we've all got the thing about getting our kids into the workforce. What are you seeing there?
So in the last quarter, all of the net job gains in the economy came from just 4 sectors that only account for 50% of employment in America. So half of the workforce is creating all of the new jobs. And those sectors are government, healthcare and education, construction, and leisure hospitality. Right. So if you're in professional services, if you're a white-collar grad wanting to go into business, marketing, communications, that kind of thing, there are not that many jobs to be had, and people aren't leaving. So the quits rate has fallen big time. Yep. People are staying in place. Right. It is actually very hard to get a job right now in the white-collar world.
Hugely valuable. Love having you on around Jobs Day. Julia Pollack, thank you so much with ZipRecruiter at Chavez Ravine with her 9-year-old today.
That'll be great.
That's
good thing.
What a mom.
Yeah.
My mom never did that.
I mean, great memory for that young fella.
What's coming up on Tuesday? We will have complete coverage of the United States elections. This begins, of course, Tuesday night. We'll do it all day, but Tuesday night at 5 p.m. Eastern. Yep. A 2-hour edition of Balance of Power, followed by coast-to-coast team coverage here from Bloomberg at 7 p.m. Get live election results and analysis with context. The context is important. The conversation is important. Tuesday night on Bloomberg Radio, on Bloomberg Television, and, of course, podcast, the YouTube channel. We'll have it all. Every multi-distribution.
Multimedia. Here. I mean, all over the place. So the Bloomberg podcasts on YouTube have just been extraordinary.
It used to be easy. It was like David Brinkley in Washington, and you go, Chet, we have a winner in North Carolina. Those days are gone.
Gone. I mean, and then at 8, 9, maybe if you push it to 10 o'clock, you call a winner.
I remember exactly where I was in 2016. We don't have time to go into it right now. But, 2016, 10 o'clock, just as you say, we have a winner.
Yeah.
This year,
I think you got to get.
Don't
you have to get back to that? Don't you have to bring some technology into the voting process so that it's real time like everything else?
Well, there's a big shift this year. Big shift in the nation rationalizing pre-voting.
Well, I literally mailed my vote in, and it seemed, as I was doing it, checking boxes, signing signatures, it seemed like this is like 1940. Can't we do something with technology?
I don't disagree.
And that we know at the close of the
Lisa,
polling.
did you do
who's
early
voting.
voting? Are you going to line up?
I'm lining up. I'm going in person.
Okay.
Go beyond the
We're
curtain.
glad that Julia Pollock and offspring will be with the Dodgers. They'll be singing with the Mamas and the Papas.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
We're addicted to the parlor game, the Fed, the monetary ballet.
Where do you see opportunities in a fixed income space here in 24?
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
AI affecting demand for cloud computing.
And Michael Barr with news.
Another legal setback for Donald Trump, this time across the pond.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Lisa Mateo back. She's back
Finally.
after
I don't know
heavy
where she
lifting.
was.
We'll talk to her in a moment about what she was doing on her assignment, as they say. Michael Barr, he stayed up late to watch the game, and he's in as well. A little bit charred, but, you know, aren't we all after watching Little League Baseball in the fifth inning? Lisa Mateo, what were you doing for Bloomberg? I mean, you become a huge cog in the wheel of driving forward events. These are important.
Yeah, for Bloomberg Live, huge event. They're doing the business value of AI. They have the Future Investor Series. So I was out there in Boston. It was a little chilly, but hence the little voice this morning, a frog in the throat.
That's what I got. I mean, I hope you don't get everybody's got it. I mean,
it does. It's that season. 'Tis the season.
Aaron Judge had it last night.
Oh, boy.
Oh, no.
It's a fly ball, dude.
But you're doing panels. This is a panel in Boston, and you've been out to LA, same thing, AI.
Yes, exactly. It's AI. So some top companies I'm talking to, like IBM talking to. This time around, some top companies. Xerox was there too. So just getting their idea of how they're using it.
We don't care. Are Paul and I going to be replaced?
No, not at all.
Thank you. Okay, we can continue.
We can move on.
Now there, Paul, Apple and Amazon this afternoon. I mean, it's important.
It's important, Tom. I mean, we've seen the big tech names, these Magnificent Seven, really be the drivers of this market for the past couple of years. So you listen to the Dan Ives of the world, they expect good things out of Amazon and Apple.
I'm looking at my phone feed this morning. Thank you out on YouTube. YouTube live chat valuable. Is there anyone not asking me for money?
Right, exactly.
I mean, it's just line. Does this end November 6th? I don't think so.
I'm getting just spammed with texts, mostly from the Democratic Party. So I don't know if they have a better operation than the Republicans. I don't know, but the Democrats are just pounding me for money on my texts.
Yeah,
I don't know what's
Vettel was
going on.
complaining about it. He's got the iPhone 16, so he's set to go as well. Let's get right to it, and this is important. Tom Purcelli coming up from the Interactive Broker Studios, our Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
And we've got NASDAQ futures leading the losses, down about 0.7% after earnings from two tech giants. They really failed to impress investors. We're talking about Microsoft. Its shares right now down 3%. Disappointing forecast for its Azure cloud computing business. Shares of Meta down 1%. 2% after warning about worsening AI losses. So after the bell, we're on to Apple, Amazon. Speaking of Amazon, it's the subject of the latest big take story. Check it out. Amazon, they want Alexa's new AI brain to rival ChatGPT, but sources are saying technical challenges are going to keep it stuck in the lab until next year. We shall see. NASDAQ futures down 0.7%, Dow futures down 0.5%, S&P futures down 0.6%. We have the 2-year yield 4.18%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year 4.29%, and that's little changed. We have Cigna up more than 9%. Third quarter earnings topped expectations. Merck, meanwhile, down 2%. Lowered the top end of its full-year sales guidance after demand for its HPV vaccine fell in China. Estee Lauder, ADR is down 23%, pulled its guidance for the year. And finally, Peloton tapped the new CEO.
Yes.
Ford executive Peter Stern, shares up 20%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa Mateo, thank you so much. Joining us now, Thomas Porcelli. He's with PGIM, our chief U.S. economist. And let me give the background on this. What we do is a blur. And when we see economists working, they each have their own treatment, their own angle. Porcelli owns a high ground, excuse me, within his economic optimism on wage growth, of measuring the wage growth of America, and no one has nailed the American growth and American wage growth in the last 2-3 years like Tom Porcelli. Tom, are our wages still rising, adjusted for inflation?
Well, it's thank you for the introduction, Tom. You're always so good to me, and
just because the Dodgers won. Continue.
Yeah. Really, do you want to go down that path already? It's still painful for me. Yeah, look, I think, wages are at a relatively elevated level. I think that's sort of a great outcome. But on balance, I think what we have to keep in mind is you are seeing slowing. I mean, that is an inescapable truth. And when I look at things like today's sort of income and spending report, I think it's very compelling. Look, we've had a series of really strong data, right, recently. But I think when you sort of lift the hood a little bit, I don't think it's nearly as strong as people think. And again, I want to make this point very, very abundantly clear. I'm not making the case for, hey, things are falling off a cliff. I'm just saying I think there's more of a nuanced story beneath the surface, and that is I think things are not nearly as strong as some of the recent data would suggest. And when I think about wages, Tom, in particular, I think about something even bigger, like disposable income or income X transfers. And when you look at those things in real terms, right, inflation adjusted terms, they're flat. They've been pretty flat now for the last 3 or 4 months. So what this means is that the consumer is being forced to sort of dip into saving to some extent, right? You remember that big revision that we got from a saving rate perspective just a few weeks ago? It went up to like 5.2, 5.3%. It's now at 4.6%. So I just think that to me is a really important nuance in the idea that, yeah, sure, wages are elevated, but the consumer is, I think, very cognizant that things are slowing down from a wage perspective.
So what do we do tomorrow with the non-farm payrolls data, Tom? I know a lot of folks are saying it's going to be kind of squirrely here with some impacts from the hurricanes and some various strikes here. How are you going to approach it?
Yeah, I think squirrely is the perfect descriptor for tomorrow's report. You have the hurricane, you have the strikes. I mean, look, we're all going to try to adjust for it, and you probably will be able to some extent. But the reality is we're not going to get a very clean print tomorrow. And here's the other sort of ugly truth. That means that the next payroll report, you're going to get an unwind of any of the impacts we're going to see tomorrow. So really, the next 2 payroll reports, you're not really going to get a very clean read.
Yeah.
But the thing is, there's countless labor data out there. And what we've seen is, if I look at that last 252,000 that we printed in the last payroll report, that was at odds with all of the other labor data, which have been showing a slowing. Again, I want to be clear. I'm not making the case that things are breaking down here. I'm just saying this is not an economy that's reaccelerating as some of the recent data would suggest. I think things are modest at best.
Tom Porcelli, help me here with the unemployment rate. Let's go back to brass tacks. And we got all this noise for the next 60 days, as you mentioned. Paul, I see a 4.1% statistic. So if it's 4.2, President Trump is going to say it's a Biden-Harris failure.
Yeah.
And
if
it's if it's 4.0, Harris is going to say, this is because of me, vote for me if I'm elected, free beer. Tom Porcelli, what is a painful unemployment rate? What statistic is a painful unemployment rate?
Well, let me first take the high ground on the idea of what tomorrow's unemployment rate is going to show, because you're quite right, Tom. Like it almost doesn't matter. It's going to be fodder for someone. But here's what we know, right? Like here's the high ground on that conversation. The unemployment rate was as low as 3.4% up until relatively recently, and now it's 4.1%, right? I mean, you've seen a 0.7% increase in the unemployment rate. You're going to get monthly wiggles. That happens every month. But I think importantly, I think you are starting to see this slowing. I mean, confidence toward the labor backdrop has deteriorated, and you can see that really well in something like the labor differential, right? The metric from the Conference Board, and that lines up really well with the unemployment rate. Now, the labor differential in the most recent click, it sort of stabilized, even lifted a little bit, but in what has been like a 1.5 year long downdraft. So I think that the unemployment rate probably continues to drift higher. But again, I stress, you can make the argument that even at 4.1%, we're sort of, we're in the realm of full employment. So even if you drift a little higher from here, I don't think it's necessarily sort of a game changer from a labor perspective. I just think it means things aren't nearly as good as some recent positive data suggests.
So what's the GDP call for PGIM these days? Slowing GDP? How slow? Any risk of a recession out there?
Yeah, Paul, I think this is a really important idea, because this goes to something that we talk about a lot internally. Everyone has this sort of the soft landing idea. And I've said this to you all before. I hate the term soft landing, because if you landed, you've stopped, right? And like this economy doesn't stop. But if you want to keep it in aeronautical terms, you operate at different altitudes. I've said this many times. So what altitude do I think this growth backdrop is operating in? I think you're in this 1.5% to 2% growth backdrop. So, sort of like slightly below trend, I think is the right way of thinking about it over the coming year, right? I stress over the coming year. And you're going to have prints, outsized gains like we saw yesterday in Q3 growth. But I think, sort of beneath it all, I think that this is, sort of a 2%-ish at best growth backdrop.
All right, Tom. So the consumer here, real quick, 30 seconds. What's your read on the U.S. consumer?
Yeah, I think the consumers, and look, I think it's going to be very hard for the consumer to have a recession. When I look at those income revisions that I mentioned earlier, think about where the revisions actually came from. They came from interest income, dividend income, and proprietor's income. And those three things are sort of top half of the income spectrum dynamics. With the top half performing as well as they have been, I think it's going to be really hard to have a recession on the consumer side. So I think you're putting a floor underneath growth to some extent.
Tom, thank you. Tom Porcelli with us with PGIM today. Just nice to get out there with a redo before tomorrow's jobs report. We'll go beneath the headline data at 8:30. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom. Paul, Lisa, with just 5 days to go before Election Day, former President Trump today is heading to the Sun Belt with stops in Nevada and Arizona. His closing message, sources say, will focus on the economy and border security. Yesterday, Trump was in the swing states, including Wisconsin and Rocky Mount, North Carolina.
We're running a campaign of solutions to save America, an America which they have virtually destroyed during their almost 4-year period of rule.
Vice President Kamala Harris was confronted by a pro-Palestinian protester at her rally in Madison, Wisconsin last night, and she addressed them directly.
We have an opportunity hey, you know what? Listen. We all want the war in Gaza to end and get the hostages out as soon as possible. And I will do everything in my power to make it heard and known. And everyone has a right to be heard, but right now I am speaking.
Harris will rally in Arizona and Nevada today. Survivors of the worst natural disaster to hit Spain in this century are stunned by scenes of devastation after villages were wiped out by monstrous flash floods that killed at least 95 people. The death toll is expected to rise as search efforts continue, with an unknown number still missing. Spain's transport minister says dead bodies in some of the hundreds of stranded vehicles remain. North Korea launched a ballistic missile that traveled for about 90 minutes, the longest flight yet, before dropping it to the Sea of Japan. The U.S. reports it was an ICBM. The Dodgers overcame a 5-run deficit to beat the Yankees 7-6 to win the World Series in 5 games. New York had a series of errors starting in the 5th inning that led to the meltdown. Yankees manager Aaron Boone.
I'm heartbroken. I'm heartbroken for those guys that pour so much into this. You know, the ending is cruel.
Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg Tom Paul Lisa.
I think we got to put it in perspective. I think, we just got to, I mean, it's painful. The audio, the video we played for years, I think we got something set up here. Ken, what do you got from 1986?
3-2 to Mookie Wilson. Little roller up along first, behind the bag. It gets through Buckner. Here comes Knight, and the Mets win it.
Good morning, 92.9 FM Boston. Okay, the reason I did that, come on, Mookie Wilson, Mookie Betts, it never ends. Congratulations to Mookie Betts from all of us in Boston. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this Bloomberg Futures Report brought to you by IBKR. Markets never sleep and neither does Interactive Brokers. Discover opportunities with CME Group futures across equity indices, interest rates, FX, energy, and more. Access CME futures around the clock at Interactive Brokers. All right, we have futures extending their climbs. One of the busiest earnings days of the earnings season. About 60 companies expected to open their books today. I want to get to some of them right off the bat. We'll start with Uber, down 7%, weaker than expected ride bookings, issued that muted holiday forecast. Delivered a record profit, though, still. Sirius, down 4%, cut its revenue forecast for the full year. You have Hyatt Hotels, cut its adjusted EBITDA forecast for the full year. And Stellantis' revenues, they slumped. Shipments declined in most of its major markets. We have tech-heavy NASDAQ futures taking a hit down from Microsoft and Meta earnings. Microsoft down 3%, Meta down 1%, so NASDAQ futures down 0.7%. Dow futures down 0.5%. S&P futures down 0.6%. The 2-year yield, 4.18%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year, 4.29%, and that is little change. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. Greg Giroux is our expert in granularity on politics at Bloomberg. He's just absolutely exquisite. Playing off of, say, some of the great work Charlie Cook. Charlie Cook's essays, Paul, have been great. He was writing like once every 2 weeks at the Cook Political Report with some real thought. And, of course, Dave Wasserman doing the granularity as well. You don't see it with Joe Matthew because he's running a show where he's got to get to the next guest and all that. And Kaylee and Joe are doing Balance of Power. But Joe Matthew long ago was a king of granularity and still is. There you are down I-81, I think it is, Joe, in Pennsylvania. You drop below Wilkes-Barre and Joe Biden's Scranton, and you get down to Philadelphia, and halfway in between is an Allentown that's not the Allentown Bruce Springsteen or Billy Joel or we grew up with. What does Allentown and Lehigh Valley look like this election?
It's majority Latino. I spoke with the mayor of Allentown, who does not like that song, by the way. He says Allentown has nothing to do with the lyrics in that song anymore. They see it as a growth story, as one that is fueled by immigrants, working class, and this is what the campaigns are trying to seize on. Of course, Donald Trump was there in Allentown just the other night, where they thought he might clean up some of the remarks that were made at Madison Square Garden. Again, this is one of the largest Puerto Rican voting blocks in the country, and after the garbage remark, there was some significance to his visit there. They even had to close schools out of some concern over security. Really? But, the big protest didn't really materialize, and it brings you back to the old Carville line: Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Alabama in the middle. Drive 50 miles in any direction and ask somebody there who they want to vote for. You have to get out of the cities to really tell this story.
So is it still these 7 swing states, Joe? It seems they've received pretty much all of the attention from both campaigns, for the last, 6 to 12 months.
It is about the swing states, although there might be a narrowing path as we get closer to Tuesday. Everybody was talking about the Sun Belt, a month or two ago when we were in Chicago. When Kamala Harris replaced Joe Biden at the top of the ticket, people saw a lane open up before them, a sunny lane from North Carolina, Georgia, all the way across to Nevada and Arizona. She was outperforming in those areas in a way that Joe Biden was not. But we've seen a major tightening in those states. And while still viable, it does seem that Democrats are right back to the greatest hits, the blue wall states of Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And it is no mystery why they're all there throughout this week and weekend. But they're going out west today, guys. It's Arizona and Nevada that we'll be watching.
Joe, you got a 42-foot Grand Banks in Orleans Harbor with the Orleans Yacht Club overlooking it. The name of your boat is Margin of Error. Do you have any confidence in any of this math, given a legitimate statistical margin of error?
I kind of don't. I think that there is something important about the consistency of the polls. 2 different organizations, Bloomberg, Siena College, New York Times, they come up with the same result with a different sample. That's important to me. But at the same time, we're curving and putting algorithms on numbers that are based on the last election and the one maybe before that. Remember when the red wave was going to happen and it didn't occur? A lot of pollsters then started to curve their polls a little bit more to be friendly or to be more sensitive to Republicans. So there's a question about, are we undersampling or oversampling Trump? Do we have the right people on the people with landlines are getting calls? How about people with cell phones? Young people of color, are they being included? I have no idea, which is why I have to give you an honest answer to your question.
Joe, you, Kayleigh Lyons, balance of power. Do you have cots set up down there in the Bloomberg studio? I mean, when are you guys going to be able? When are you guys going to be able to call this election?
I was going to ask you because I'm coming up there tomorrow. We're not coming home until it's done.
We're doing it in New York.
Yes, that's this full smash, the big group. Okay, you're going to have to make room for us. I don't know. I've had more people say recently, it could be Thursday, it could be Wednesday. 4 years ago, it was Saturday. And we have no reason to think that it'll be less than
let's get ahead. I mean, Kayleigh's over in the Julie Andrews suite at the Regency Hotel, and I know you're staying at You're staying at Motel 6 down in the West 40s. But Joe, what's the one conversation you want to have on balance of power? I'm going to say 5 p.m. or 4 p.m. November 5th. Who's the warm body you want to talk to within the cable TV, radio idiocy?
You might have mentioned his name already. Is it Charlie Cook? Frank Luntz is coming on the program today. I like the fact that Frank is sitting down with real people, and these focus groups, in the end, might be more accurate than the broad-based polls when we talk to thousands of people who mattered 4 years ago. But this is all going to be hindsight. Come Wednesday, have they called it yet? That's going to be the biggest question that we have next week.
I mean, I saw, where are we in time? We got time left here. I saw Charlie Cook writing, the Cook Political Report. It was a really important, dense thing about this is not our history. This is totally brand new, right, Joe?
Your favorite word, original. Yes, I think we can apply that in this case because all of the tools that we have that might have felt a little bit broken a couple of years ago, we don't even know if they're working. We're using them, but we're not going to know until it's too late if they're working. Is this thing really 50-50? Do we really believe that? Because if they're off by, say, 5 points in one direction or another, this is going to look pretty silly the next morning. One thing I will say, I mentioned Nate Silver earlier. He says if Harris wins the popular vote by 4 points, a 2-point error, she's favored for a blowout on the electoral. Donald Trump, on the other hand, favored for a blowout if he wins by just a half point. So think of those
Brilliant.
numbers when we're
Brilliant.
counting next Tuesday night.
Joe Matthew, Katie Lyons, leading our election coverage. John Farrell parachuting in as well. Join our complete coverage, the U.S. election results Tuesday night at 5 p.m. Eastern, a special 2-hour edition of Balance of Power with Joe Matthew and Katie Lyons, followed by Coast to Coast team coverage at 7 p.m., live election results and action results, and analysis with context Tuesday night on Bloomberg Radio, on Bloomberg Television, and of course on the YouTube channel as well, building out each and every day. Every time Joe's on, I learn something.
I do too.
That 4 percentage point, half a percentage point difference. I don't get the math.
I was in an Irish pub a few weeks ago. Somebody asked me about this whole electoral college thing. I was a little bit of a loss. I need to go back on my civics and kind of bone up a little bit, because how can you lose the popular vote, but then win the election? I got to go back and work on that.
I'm so glad you bring that up, because I carry with me, I think from the last election, all my memories as a child. Like Arizona's inconsequential.
Right.
40 years ago.
Exactly.
It's like they got AUH2O. They got Barry Goldwater, and that's it. And they had like 2, 3, 4, whatever electoral votes. Now, with a booming Phoenix, I believe it's 11 electoral votes. They're like a big deal.
They're a big deal.
Guerra says it's like a huge deal.
Yeah, that's
Where
right.
Where is Guerra?
I have no idea. I thought he was in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania.
You had the chip.
Who knows? I know he's not in Brooklyn anymore.
You had the chip installed. You put the chip in his neck, right?
In his ankle.
He was in Wisconsin yesterday.
I think so. And then, but he's going to Pennsylvania at some point. I'm not sure when that is. So they're just sending him to all the battleground states. So he'll be all over the place.
Let me translate that for you. He's looking at a D45. He's going to be in Nazareth, Pennsylvania.
Exactly.
He's going, do I want the X bracing that Neil Young had in 1968, 69, or do I want a newer, lighter John Mayer bracing?
There you go.
That's really what he's doing.
Okay.
He's in Nazareth, Pennsylvania.
Okay, very good. We'll check it out.
I don't know. The D45 may be too much for bluegrass. David Guerra leading so much of our coverage here. Look for the big take as well. We need to get the market open. It's Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And the opening bell report brought to you by JP Morgan Asset Management. Stay informed on today's fastest growing investment vehicle with the new guide to ETFs. Visit jpmorgan.com/ETF insights to learn more. All right, a big day of earnings when the market's still feeling the impact from Microsoft and Meta earnings. We also had more economic data. Weekly jobless claims dropped to the lowest since May. And then the employment cost index that posted the smallest increase in 3 years during the third quarter. So let's get to the markets right now as we start to get things started. With the S&P 500, that's where we'll begin with, down 0.7%, 43 points at 5,769. We have the Dow down 0.5%, 215 points at 41,926, and the Nasdaq down 1%, 192 points, 18,414. So we have the 2-year yield at 4.18%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year, 4.30%. And that is little changed as well. At the open, have to check in with Microsoft right now. They're down 4% and Meta down 2%. That is your opening bell report. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. Great report. We'll watch Microsoft and Facebook here as we can. And Paul, again, it's Apple and Amazon this afternoon is the Derby.
Yeah, those are pretty big. Those are pretty big for a lot of tech folks.
I'm going to describe my chart of the year. We can do this on radio. It really works to, visualize a chart on radio. It's just like great. Brian Whalen with us, CIO with TCW, one of our most popular guests on fixed income on grabbing a coupon. Brian, it's just simple. The bond market recovery that we've seen, the Bloomberg corporate total return up 17%, up 9% annualized. I mean, really remarkable coming off the gloom, the 6 standard deviation gloom that we saw in the bond market. Do you just visualize out 1, 2, 3 years that we continue to see a price recovery in fixed income?
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement, Tom. I think, look, you're clipping a nice coupon, in a highly diversified, high quality bond fund. You're getting a yield of somewhere between 5 and 5.5%. So that's a nice place to start. And then the other component of bond returns is the way the prices move up and down. Certainly it's not going to be a straight line, and markets go up, markets go down. And, we saw prices in the bond market go way up in August and September. And then we've seen them retrace a little bit, as we've had some mixed economic data, and there's concerns about the elections and, what might be coming down the pike with regards to tariffs and inflations. And so we pulled back a bit. But over the long term, as you think out over the next 1 to 2 years, we're definitely in a camp that the Fed has already said interest rates are going to be coming back down. So, while you start with this nice coupon, and, you can't have your cake and eat it too, meaning that, if rates are going to come down over time and your prices are going to go up, which is going to help your total rate of return, it's going to help that price go up. Eventually, your coupon starts to come down as well. But overall, you should be looking at kind of healthy mid to upper single-digit type of returns in the bond market over the next couple of years.
Tom, as an equity analyst, I go out to LA 2 or 3 times a year to see the clients. And of course, you had to go to TCW, but I decidedly avoided the fixed income floor at TCW. Wanted nothing to do with those people because, Brian, I look at it, I got a Fed that's cutting rates, so I have no idea why yields are going higher. I thought, is this because of the election? Is it because of the economic data? Don't people realize that the Fed is cutting rates?
Yeah. First of all, Paul, we're very nice people here at the fixed income department. So you're welcome anytime. I'll treat you quite kindly. I can promise you that. Look, that's a great question. Like, why are rates rising? It's twofold right now. One, the market has adjusted a little bit the pace at which the Fed's going to lower rates. Okay. And so, in September, it was about lowering rates so that at the end of 2025, maybe the Fed funds rate would be down near around 3%. Now, that number is about 3.6%, which, by the way, is important to say that even a little over a year ago, 14 months from now, the market right now is pricing the Fed funds rate to still be in restrictive territory by about 100 basis points. So that's pulled off quite a bit. And why is that? Mixed economic data. You've got kind of 3 different camps here in economic data. In the first camp, you got this like hard government data that just screams soft landing, no landing. Everything's going to be okay. And then things like retail sales and payrolls, which have come in very strong the last month, have kind of supported that. And we're going to get another payrolls number tomorrow. But the problem with that data is that it's highly subjective because it's being kind of adjusted and massaged by the official scorekeepers at the government based upon the way they view this economy is operating post-COVID, the way people spend, operate their lives, how they spend in September versus spending in September, a year ago. And so, a number that pre-COVID, an employment number that would have come in at 114,000 came in at 240,000, and so that looks strong, but subjective, and retail sales was the same thing. Then you've got this kind of camp of hard data, which kind of looks a little softer, and just this week we saw quits rate. So basically, employees willing to leave their jobs, that's as low as it's been in about 4 years. The job openings rate has come back down, and it's at this point where people are concerned that, employers have pulled back the openings such that the next move from them might be to cut people. So that looks soft. And then you've got finally this camp of like really kind of it's the softer data, but you've got a TCW, you know, we've got 100 people looking at investment grade companies, high yield companies, leverage loans, private credit. And that whole story is one of like consumer retrenchment. And so it's hard to kind of read the tea leaves. And then finally, obviously, you got the election. And people they like sound bites, they like soft narratives. And right now, the easy story in the political arena is a red wave that leads to higher tariffs and higher inflation. And that's why the long end of the curve has come up the last few weeks.
Brian, Microsoft here, folks, down 20, 430 down to 410 right now. Lisa will give you a better quote on that here in a moment. Brian, from where you sit, and you're sort of on, I mean, I know you're going to Chavez Ravine tomorrow for the celebration of the Dodgers, but Brian,
since you're right by the office,
since you're on the left coast with the parade going by the office, I have the greatest memories of the Red Sox parades. I felt like flat Earth, like I couldn't believe they'd actually won.
Yeah, exactly.
Not with the Dodgers. The Dodgers are expected to win. Brian, I look at the debt of big tech. Do you at TCW wish these guys would get their act together and issue more debt? Microsoft with 2.9% weighting of debt. Should they issue more debt?
I mean, look, should they issue more debt? They certainly can. You know, they come out, the size of the issuance is very large. And so they certainly have when you look at it from a leverage perspective, their leverage is extremely low. The problem, you know, with debt coming from these companies like Microsoft is that, you know, value you're fine. And from an underwriting perspective, you're fine. It's just about what are you getting paid for it. And right now, the highest quality parts of the bond market, like companies like Microsoft, they issue debt at yields that are just, you have to kind of just squint to see the extra yield premium you're getting versus treasuries. And so you sit back, you say, all right, they could issue more debt and leverage is still low, but like, do I really want to take the risk of even a company like Microsoft when I'm just getting this much extra yield versus treasuries? Probably not. And to be honest with you, that's actually a good kind of indication of where, you know, yields are, or I should say, you know, spreads are in overall compensation in the rest of the corporate bond market, which is pretty minimal relative to history.
How about corporate high yield? I'm looking at the INGO function on the Bloomberg terminal, the Bloomberg index browser, and the best return in the fixed income space is U.S. corporate high yield, 7.59% year to date. What do you think about the high yield business? Again, not a lot of spread, but man, that's where the money's been made.
It has. It's been a nice run. Mostly, it's all been this kind of coupon clip. You get this nice spread, but you know, spreads there not as snug as investment grade corporates, but you know, historically speaking, you know, right now you're getting paid an extra 2.7% of yield over a U.S. Treasury, which is pretty tight historically. So there's not a lot of room for error. So as an investor in the high yield market, I would say it two ways. Like one, if you're thinking long term, you know what? Companies look relatively healthy. You know, even the ones with high leverage, like in the high yield market or the leverage loan market. So even if the economy slows down, even if we enter a recession, you're probably not going to see a lot of defaults. So from a long-term perspective, that's a healthy market to invest in. However, on the other hand, you know, you start to get into the weeds now in the bond world of spread duration. If those spreads, if something happens in the market, the economy turns down, or the stock market comes down, or there's a contested election, or any of these other things, and let's just say spreads go from 2.7% so of yield over treasuries to what's historical average, let's call it 4% over. That's over 100 basis point move higher. That's going to hit you in terms of price by a magnitude of about 5%. And you'll see that immediately. Now, over time, you'll earn your way out of that. But that's, you know, when you're thinking about it more from a short-term trading perspective, that's not a very compelling story.
Brian, thank you. Brian Whalen with us. TCW, they're always interesting on clipping and capturing total return and coupon as well. The Dow, negative 155. With our news in New York City, here's Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. 5 days are left until Election Day. Yesterday, Kamala Harris spent a lot of time in the battleground state of Pennsylvania. The vice president told the rally that she'll fight for all Americans.
We love our country. And when you love something, you fight for it.
After rallying supporters in North Carolina and a media gaggle from a garbage truck, former President Trump ended his night with a rally in Green Bay, Wisconsin.
My response to Joe and Kamala is very simple. You can't lead America if you don't love Americans. That's true.
Both Trump and Harris will campaign in southwestern states today. At least 95 people are dead in the flooding in Spain and is expected to rise, that death toll, as the search and rescue effort continues. A number of people died in their submerged vehicles. North Korea today test-fired a missile that flew long enough, 86 minutes, and far enough, almost vertically, to reach the United States. The missile test comes at a time of increasing tension on the North Korean peninsula. The Los Angeles Dodgers won their second World Series championship in 5 seasons, overcoming a 5-run deficit with the help of Yankees' defensive miscues to beat New York 7-6 in Game 5. It appeared Aaron Judge and the Yankees are right back in this World Series in the 5th inning. And then they weren't.
And it's line to center field, charging Judge. He dropped the ball and throws to second. Too late. So that'd be an error on Judge. That's the first time I've seen him drop a ball.
WFAN with the call. Shortstop Anthony Volpe and ace pitcher Garrett Cole also committed costly mistakes.
You're loving this. You've been doing all morning. You know.
Well, you know, I feel bad for the AL supporters, even me, even a Detroit Tigers fan. I want the AL to do well.
I mean, it's just too much. I mean, you know, are we going to do this tomorrow?
Exactly.
We're going to have team coverage.
coverage.
One of our former interns, Haley Koufax, will be out doing team coverage for us in Los Angeles tomorrow. David Faber over at CNBC out with a report that's, I think, been hugely expected for what, Paul? 20 years?
Yeah.
The Roberts family's not happy. Disney 10-year return is under 2% per year. Comcast ain't much better.
No.
6% per year. That's unacceptable. So what do you do?
So, David Faber over at CNBC is reporting that they may spin out their cable network business. Their cable networks, only about 8 or 9% of the operating income of the company. They get most of their operating income from their cable business and their broadband business. So it's kind of a drag because the cord cutting is just really hitting their revenue in terms of advertising and subscription fees. So maybe they're just saying, let's just get this thing out on its own. And
catch us up with Paramount. Where's CBS stand? I mean, Paramount should be called the CBS stock, but
yeah, so,
is it like the same thing as CBS? Nobody wants this stuff.
Yeah, it's tough. Their business, they're even more exposed to the cable network business again. So they're Paramount. They're being acquired by Skydance. Who knows what's going to happen there?
We don't know.
We don't know. But there's no real upside here unless streaming gets super profitable super quickly. I think for a lot of these companies. So it's tough times.
It's a nice moonshot. As well there on Comcast right now, up a little bit. Lisa will have that quote for you here as we go through the morning. We're on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts on Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, our new distribution. Sirius XM, good morning at Channel 121. And of course in Washington, New York, and Boston. Good morning, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got stocks falling on the last day of a solid month with Microsoft, Meta weighing heavily on trading. After disappointing outlooks, we have Microsoft down 5%, Meta down 2%. The tech-heavy NASDAQ down more than 1%, 270 points. We have the Dow down 0.4%, 201 points. We have the S&P 500 down 0.8%, or 51 points. The two-year yield at 4.19%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year 4.29%, and that is little change. Few stocks on the move. Estee Lauder ADR is down 22%. Pulled its guidance for the year due to uncertainty in China. Also cut its dividend. You have Roku down 19%. Reported revenue missed estimates. Uber down. Uber is down about 7% as well. Reported weaker than expected ride bookings. Robinhood lower. Reported revenue that missed estimates. So in all the doom and gloom, where are we seeing a lift? That would be Peloton. Peloton up 19%, naming Ford executive Peter Stern as CEO and president. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Greatly appreciate it. Bloomberg Surveillance, and we say good morning to you. This is now, whether you're Republican or Democrat, undecided. Any other parties we know?
No, I think that's
that
as far as we know right now.
This is the conversation with someone with deep experience on trade. I want you to push aside every single pundit and expert. The path here is from Michael Froman to Robert Lighthizer. And these are the two individuals that have most studied and affected a trade policy for the United States of America. Mr. Froman has moved on from his public service to President Obama, to President of the Council on Foreign Relations, and importantly has written a new report, a new essay, I should say, on the new Washington Consensus. Michael, it's a required read for any student going back to Smoot-Hawley. Do we have a new Washington Consensus that you and Mr. Lighthizer could agree upon?
Well, look, I think the old Washington Consensus, which was really about hyper-globalization and all the benefits of global integration, I think that has very much been weakened. I think we have the beginnings of a new consensus, but there are a lot of unanswered questions still to address. And that's what that essay talks about, which is a lot of the actions that we're thinking about taking to reduce our dependence on China, whether it's export controls or constraints on foreign investment or protectionism. Those also come with costs like raising inflation or raising the cost of living. And we need to address those trade-offs and create some sort of framework going forward if we're going to pursue those kinds of tools.
But the heart of it within the polarization of America, and we see this with the minted Nobel laureates, Acemoglu, Robinson, and Johnson, the heart of the matter is the separation of America into elites looking for some form of post-World II benevolent, egalitarian trade policy, and everybody else saying we're getting killed. How do we bring that? How do we amend that together beside permanent polarization?
Well, I think first we should recognize that on one hand, globalization has achieved some of the most significant gains in human history in terms of reducing poverty, lifting hundreds of millions, if not a billion or more people out of poverty, increased competitiveness, spread technology around the world. There have been a lot of positives to it. I think all along we knew that there are winners and losers in globalization, and that hopefully the economy makes up for people who lose out from globalization by creating new jobs, new industries that they go into. But that's not been simultaneous. And we've seen the deindustrialization of certain communities in the U.S., and that has had a real negative impact on those workers, those communities, and their families. I think, Tom, the real issue is trade policy or globalization itself is not enough. I think we always needs to be accompanied by domestic policies that are designed to ensure that workers survive and thrive in a rapidly changing economy, whether that change comes from technology, think about AI, or from trade or from immigration. And we have not had a domestic policy agenda under either Democratic or Republican administrations that have successfully dealt with that.
So is globalization dead? I mean, there's probably a couple of generations of us that have grown up with the whole concept of globalization. where are we? Is this a bump on the road, or is this something more fundamental?
Well, first of all, it's certainly not dead. The trade is at an all-time high. It's not growing as much as it was before. It used to outstrip global growth. Now it's somewhat behind global growth, but it is still growing. And what we're seeing are changing patterns of trade. And so rather than being overly dependent on China, we're seeing supply chains beginning to move. Not necessarily people pulling out of China, although there's been some of that, but more as companies think about where to put their next factory. They're either thinking about putting it in the United States or in some other market, Vietnam, Mexico, Malaysia, Thailand, elsewhere. And so that is still globalization, but it's reflecting that it's not just about efficiency anymore. You don't necessarily go to the most efficient place to produce because there are other issues that are important too, other values like redundancy, resilience, diversification, and national security. And we're now balancing efficiency against those other values. And that's another trade-off, again, that I think the next administration is going to really have to wrestle with if we're going to have an enduring consensus.
Tariffs. Boy, they're not just one party talking tariffs. It seems like everybody's talking tariffs these days to varying degrees. How do you view tariffs?
And when it comes to the consumer, low-income consumers spend a disproportionate amount of their income on tradable goods like clothing and footwear and things of that sort. And so it's really a regressive tax on them.
Mike, I got time for one more question. Nick Burns is nailing diplomacy in China. His Twitter feed is a State Department mandate read. He's on the train. He's driving all over China on the train, going to see things, moving it forward. Is Nick Burns on your short list if we do get a President Harris as Secretary of State?
Well, nobody's asking me for my list, but Nick Burns is an incredible diplomat, incredible public servant. He's doing a fantastic job there, as he's done in his previous jobs, and he would be a great asset to any administration.
Is Michael Froman on your short list for Secretary of State? I'm busting.
No,
your
I'm
chops,
I'm very happy at the Council on Foreign Relations, and I'm honored to have served 15 years in government, and I'm delighted to be at the Council on Foreign
Never
Relations.
returning again to Bloomberg Surveillance. Michael Froman with the Council on Foreign Relations. I can't say enough about the essays in foreign affairs. Whatever your politics, folks, it's just absolutely fabulous. This has been a fun day.
Sure.
I mean, the whole Yankees-Dodgers thing and all that. And it's 114 days to Tampa Red Sox spring training.
Exactly.
Citrus League.
Exactly.
Where's Juan Soto go?
I don't know. That's a great question, Tom. I don't know, but he'll have no shortage of deep-pocketed
He could be
owners.
Secretary of State.
He can do anything he wants. He can go anywhere he wants. Hopefully he stays with the Yankees, but we'll see.
So you mentioned it earlier. I have not given enough love to this. I mean, I don't know. Do you put Maglona on every day?
I know.
BitDog 71,000?
Sure.
That's a story of the year that nobody's talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's just. I just think it's a. To me, it's just a risk asset here, and it just kind of moves with the market here. So we've got the market, and we're the Nasdaq or the S&P only 2.5% off the high, even after the sell-off.
There's institutions out in California, in Los Angeles. One of them is the Los Angeles Dodgers, but another one's a Pasadena Playhouse. You see it in movies, like it's like gorgeous old building and all that, and they show it in that. 30 years ago, there was a recording studio right next to it. I don't know if it's still there, but a songwriter went in there and she did an album, and it was like, no big deal. And the song became definitive LA iconic. And it's just like, it's unfair to say out of nowhere, but boom, Sheryl Crow just went right to the top.
Absolutely.
With All I Want to Do. We're having fun playing Los Angeles music today. Started with the Beach Boys. Do you think Van Halen is Los Angeles music?
I do.
I think so.
Yeah, I do.
We'll do Van Halen on Monday.
We'll get Van VH.
John Tucker. We got John Tucker's like, we need more Bon Jovi. He's like,
more Jersey.
Maybe with the Jets tonight.
You
we'll
never did
Bon
Phil
Jovi.
Lesh.
Sheryl Crow, congratulations to all of you on your Dodgers victory. Bloomberg Surveillance.